Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto massive changes start from the Chunin exams part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third fire shadow, a man well into his midlife, was sitting in the chair of his reinstated position as leader of the village hidden in the leaves. He was clad in the traditional robes of the village leader, made from light fabrics, but handing off him with the weight of chainmail. These robes felt so much heavier than even that now, with every passing second seeming to add new links of weight to them. He had served his time as leader not so long ago, his position was in the hands of a new, better, younger, fitter and brighter leader only a few hours ago. The village had a new face to look upon to guide them into a better future. God knew this village needed it after everything it has endured throughout the years. A new idol to inspire hope, and that is what they had with the fourth fire shadow, but not anymore. That bright fire was prematurely choked out this very night. Hiruzen felt a strong breeze pushed past him, stealing him from his thoughts. He looked over to where the breeze came from and looked out to the west of the village through the huge gaping jagged hole in the side of the Hokage building. Through it, he looked into the night of the village, out to all the destruction left from the attack. The sight made him sigh, the noise hoarse and heavy as he fell back into his seat. The chair was new and not the one he previously used, unlike the desk that had been here since the village was founded barely even 90 years ago. So much had happened in such little time, his wife had left to go and deliver a baby, a very special baby. Then a few hours later, in the black of night it arrived, the Kyuubi, the nine-tailed fox, the absolute embodiment of power and destruction. He had thought the fourth had it under control, that it couldn't get out not while he was there to contain it. Seemed he was wrong, very wrong. Hiruzen learned not an hour ago that Anbu found the midwives that were assigned to deliver the very special child, all of them dead, including his wife. Hearing that it immediately made the new widow want some privacy. Though in fact he wasn't alone, it was funny really that the last baby his wife would help deliver would find its way into his care. He turned his gaze down to the child. Wrapped in white fabric, little chubby cheeks lined with a pair of evenly spaced out whisker marks, short tufts of spiky blonde hair growing from its head, along with closed eyes that hid big blue eyes from the world. He was certainly cute, so pure, so innocent, which only made one fact harder to face. The burden had been placed on this young child. The Nine Tails was a fearsome creature, a force of nature and something unkillable for the fact after death it will eventually return. Knowing this, the fourth made a choice and decided that it needed to be resealed away, if not it would have meant the end of the village. The process of sealing cost the fourth his life, hence why Hiruzen was now leader yet again. And of where the beast was now, it was in Hiruzen's arms, imprisoned within this little boy, inside a seal that the fourth gave his life to craft. Hiruzen looked at the time, the clock on the wall having barely scraped past destruction. He was due for a council meeting in a few minutes to decide the village's next actions against the aftermath of this enormous post-crisis. Hiruzen closed his eyes and took a deep calming breath, trying to dust off the Hokage inside him that was so eager to have gone into rest shortly after his passing of the mantle. After a minute of doing this he stood up, the child began to stir. Shhh little Naruto, no need to wake up now. His words seemed to have worked magic because the now named Naruto did cease squirming. Hiruzen smiled in satisfaction. The third left his office for the council room. Before the meeting he had an announcement to make and he wondered how it would go. Awful. Absolutely awful. He silently cursed the fourth for leaving him with such a request. Everyone was soaked in too much grief and heartbreak to deal with such news like this, but it was his last request, so he had to fulfill it. Next was the meeting, he wondered how that would go. Surprisingly well. A little extra explanation here and there and people were willing to accept how things were with the boy and they could all move on to what had to be done with the village. Everyone didn't seem very up to the task of reinforcing the village, but after a word on how this world will take advantage of any chip in their armor and the clarification that there were many in ours, people seemed ready to get to work and push aside their grief for the time being. Hiruzen could only thank them for this. After the meet concluded, Hiruzen began making his exit. During the meetings, plans had been arranged to have little Naruto sent off to an orphanage. One where the boy could have a normal childhood and choose whether or not he even wanted to become a shinobi. Hiruzen had one in mind, a home run by an old retired jonin who is aware of people in Naruto's shoes. The third knew that she wouldn't treat him any different from the other children in her care. As Hiruzen was making his way to the exit he stopped at sensing a familiar stare. What is it, Danzo? From shadows that didn't exist stepped out a man of similar age to the Hokage, his face half covered in bandages, one arm cradled in a fabric arm sling, a cane in the other, and an X scar on his chin. His face was unreadable, his thoughts hidden, but his aura though gave away that whatever they were they couldn't be pleasant. Danzo looked at Hiruzen, then to the baby in his arms, and pointed at with his cane. We wouldn't have a new container right now if it wasn't for the Ichiha. Hiruzen said nothing to this. But Danzo had plenty. Hiruzen, you and me both know that the Kyuubi appearing in the middle of the village can only mean one thing, another one of them has done it. Another one has figured out how to control the Kyuubi, just like Madara. Hiruzen fully turned to face his equal in age, a disapproving frown on his face. There is no proof to suggest that the Uchiha had anything to do with this attack. Danzo's grip on his cane tightened, the sound of wood being pressed could be heard. What more proof do we need? It was clearly summoned into the village. There is only one power that could subjugate it enough so that it could be summoned like a pet. Don't be a fool, Hiruzen, if we don't do something it could happen again, we must deal with the enough, said the third, cutting Danzo short. Everything about him brimmed with irritation and annoyance, even if the facts were there. But right now, he was tired and he needed time to think this all over. Even if he didn't want to believe it for the safety of the village, he may have to suspect that maybe the Uchiha did have something to do with this. But he will not do it with bias like Danzo would. Danzo frowned at Hiruzen, cutting him off like that. Hiruzen breathed a sigh. We will discuss this tomorrow, Danzo, but not tonight, okay? The way the man looked at him with that one closed eye told Hiruzen that it was not. But he nodded anyway. Very well, Hiruzen, and with that Danzo turned around and walked off. But we mustn't idle about for too long, or who knows what the Uchiha may pull next. Hiruzen groaned at Danzo's paranoia. If you listen to it for too long it becomes infections. Hiruzen feared that it may already be doing that to him, given the fact that he was willing to discuss it with Danzo tomorrow. Hiruzen began his trek back home to his clan compound uninterrupted for the most part, most people off taking care of whatever they needed to do in order to start getting back on their feet. His clan compound, for the most part, escaped damage. The left half of the house was collapsed, but the rest was fine. Hiruzen made his way up the stairs to his bedroom, sadly just as alone now, and set up a crib pulled from storage. Before setting Naruto to rest, he decided he needed a nappy, so removed his bundle wrapping. It was there, it could be seen, the seal. The only thing between the village and the unlimited wrath of the Kyuubi. It looked like nothing but a fancy drawing on the belly of the little baby, but to the eyes of Hiruzen, the thing might as well have been all the world's hardest puzzles, mixed with locks which needed keys that were inside the other safes in order to unlock, hidden behind a wall. That was surrounded by a candle that you could only pass if you knew how to mix 3 dead languages together to make a single sentence. So yeah, it was a piece of work, a masterpiece in the old man's option. Its design just looked like some fancy drawing, a spiral in the center of the boy's belly encircled by scribbles, some lines going out in narrow lines. Though Hiruzen did find something wasn't there before in the original description of this seal. 9 magatomas laying perfectly spaced out between the spiral and the circling scribbles. Hiruzen wished that he could ask the fourth about this, maybe he found a way to improve on the initial design. Hiruzen finished placing a nappy on Naruto and wrapped him back up and placed him in his crib. He was sure Naruto would be safe here, his room was lined with security seals all over. So Hiruzen left the baby to rest, and now he could go and grieve with his daughter over the death of his wife before work tomorrow. He would later send word to his son. After Hiruzen left, Naruto began to stir and was about to start crying out, but stopped when his young body felt a warm soothing sensation wash over him. Naruto's young body began to glow with a warm silver-colored aura that shrouded him from the neck down. This aura began to gain more motion like it was coming to life. The silver continued to change till it looked to take the form of what seemed like a blanket made of chakra that flickered and moved smoothly like flames. The young baby Naruto's attention was taken by the sound of a voice. Shhh, calm down young child, you are not alone, I am here for you, and will continue to be here for as long as I am needed. You and I will meet when it's time, spoke the voice, which just seemed to soothe Naruto back off to sleep. The shadowed figure stood on the surface of the shallow ankle-deep water facing the mammoth tall gate, a slip of paper stuck to it, saying seal in kanji. Peering into the cage, the massive sleeping form of the yang half of the 9 tails could be seen, currently in hibernation after being ripped into 2 separate entities. Turning away from the caged fox, the figure began looking around his new home and sighed. It may not be luxurious, but it's better than just floating about for all eternity. With that humored thought done, the figure clapped his hands together and gave them a little rub. Well, let's see what I can do with this place, he spoke with a calm, happy tone, looking forward to doing some redecorating. 7.5 years later, it was a bright sunny day in Konoha. All visible damage from that night over 7 years ago has long since been repaired, but the scars on the people's hearts had yet to fully fade. Walking down the road with a smile on his face was a young 7-year-old boy who possessed the most vivid mop of spiky blonde hair you would ever see, along with a pair of bright ocean blues eyes. This boy also had 3 odd whisker marks, marking each of his cheeks. The young boy was wearing a white top with a stylized fire mark on the front and a pair of green shorts and blue shinobi sandals. This boy was none other than Naruto Uzumaki, and today was another sad day for the boy, despite the smile that was being shown. Naruto was a boy with very few friends, he could count all his friends on one hand. There was the old Hokage, the old matron who ran the orphanage he was living at, the Ichiraku family and Shikamaru Nara, but even then they very rarely talked, mainly because Shikamaru was often asleep even when outside. The reason Naruto had next to no one he could call a friend was because all the parents of Konoha told their children to stay away from him, that then resulted in those children telling all the other children the same thing, including the other orphans. Sadly it worked and they did, and Naruto became isolated and ostracized. With Naruto being seen this way he became prone to getting picked on and bullied, mostly name-calling and the rare attempt at beating him up. The adults wanted nothing to do with him, anytime they would catch sight of him, they would either ignore him completely or glare at him intensely. He would also often hear people whispering about him, calling him that boy or thing. He often heard people referring to him as demon brat or monster child. He didn't know why they called him all those names. He tried asking the old man, but he always told him that the people didn't understand him, or he would change the conversation or even distract him with ramen or sweets. The worst time Naruto had with the villagers was when he sneaked out of the orphanage one night and a drunk man tried to attack him. Naruto ran away from the man, but he chased him and cornered him in an alleyway. Naruto, only 5, and terrified by what was to him at the time a giant, was scared and curled up in the corner of the alley and closed his eye, hoping the man wouldn't see him. The strange thing about that night was that Naruto became enveloped in a gentle warm feeling that would come to him any time he was feeling really negative, only the strange thing is on that night it came stronger than ever before. After the feeling faded, the 5-year-old found the man that was chasing him walking away from him as if he was under some sort of trance. He didn't react to anything around him, he just walked off like some mindless drone following a command. That was a very scary and all-round weird night for the young boy, and when he went off to bed the warm feeling stayed with him all night, soothing him to sleep, making him feel total safe. This warm feeling had been with Naruto for as long as he could remember, so it was not strange to him that it just popped up at any fixed or random time. He would remember any time he felt down it would appear and comfort him when no one else would, any time he felt angry or hateful it would appear and calm him down, any time he would become depressed, it would appear as if it was telling him to cheer up. The warm sensation made Naruto feel like he had someone watching over him, looking out for him and was picking him up when he fell down. He couldn't explain it, but the feeling felt like it was more than just a feeling, it felt almost alive. Naruto never told anyone about it, he didn't want anyone looking at him more strangely than they already did. Naruto was excited to start the ninja academy in half a year. He was asked by the Hokage if he wanted to become one, and Naruto enthusiastically replied that he did. Naruto liked the ninja of Konoha, they were nicer to him than most of the villagers, and he had seen them doing all sorts of cool stuff that himself wanted to do. Currently Naruto was on his way to his favorite place to get food, well, the only place he could really get any food outside the orphanage, since most shops overcharged him or didn't sell to him at all. In no time Naruto arrived at a little ramen stand called Ichiraku Ramen. The people who run the place were some of the few villagers who did not hate Naruto for his status as a Jinchuriki. One of the reasons being was that Teuchi knew Naruto's father and mother and in no time worked out who Naruto's parents. The main clue not being his appearance, but the speed in which he devoured any bowl of ramen in his reach reminded the man of Kushina way too much. Teuchi has said nothing to Naruto about his parents because the Hokage had ordered the ramen chef to not say a word to anyone about Naruto's heritage, out precaution that the information could leak out to Minato's and Kushina's enemies. Arriving, Naruto quickly pulled himself up onto one of the stools and saw the chef and his daughter at work cooking what was to him the most magical and heavenly food, even to bless a bowl in the ninja world. Pulling himself out of his brief ramen-induced trance and wiping away the small trail of saliva that drooled out of his mouth, Naruto called out to the pair, "Hey old man, hey AM, guess who's back?" he said, Naruto flashing a big bright grin at the pair. AM smiled at the sight of the small shocking blonde-haired boy, happy to see his grinning face. "Oh Naruto, and what can I get my?" corrected AM's father. The teen rolled her eyes before picking up her question, "And what can I get our favorite customer today?" She finished with a sweet smile. Naruto lifted up his little hand to AM with his palm facing outwards and his hand showing 3 of his finger, 3 big bowls of miso ramen. "With extra pork," ordered Naruto, already drooling like a waterfall just talking about it. The young waitress laughed at the sight of the overly excited boy and went off to give the order to her father before coming back to her favorite little blonde. "So Naruto, I heard you're gonna learn how to be a ninja," recalled AM out loud, leaning onto the counter with her head resting on her left palm. Naruto nodded fast and rapidly, making his hair bounce around. Yep and yep. "I'm going to be the best ninja ever and I am gonna learn all sorts of cool jutsus, how to jump around all over the place like all those other ninjas do, which will allow me to finally reach all those stupidly high places and will better improve my pranking prowess. It's been getting a bit boring lately with my limited access to high places, and when I do become the best I am gonna take that hat from the old man," proclaimed Naruto in the most excited and confident tone you could ever hear. Heki looked over to Naruto, putting a hand on his chef hat in an almost protective manner. "Now Naruto, you aren't talking about my hat, are you?" questioned the ramen chef in mock fear. Am laughed at her father, while Naruto raised a confused eyebrow. "What? No, I mean the other old man," said Naruto, whose words made Tucci let loose a dramatic sigh of relief. Am turned back to Naruto and started rubbed his spiky blonde head, which he tried to squirm out of. "I wish you luck in becoming a ninja, Naruto," said Am warmly and looking at him kindly. Naruto stopped squirming and gave Am a big smile. "Nah, I don't need luck, because I'm gonna be the best and the best don't need luck," exclaimed Naruto, putting his fist to his chest before speaking again, but this time almost as a whisper. "But thanks anyway," whispered out Naruto just loud enough for Am to hear. The young teen smiled at the Naruto. "Anytime," she said before walking off to go take care of some other things around the kitchen. Shortly after Am left, Naruto's ramen had arrived, and the massacre that ensued upon those bowls the moment they were placed in front of that vacuum could not be described in words. Naruto had sometimes nearly taken Tucci's hand off in the past, with chopsticks no less, by how very violently he went for the helpless bowls of ramen. After Naruto was done eating. No, oh yes. Destroying the 3 poor souls of ramen, he paid his for his victims and left the stand to go head back to the orphanage. The sun was beginning to set in Konoha, thereby bathing everything into the glow of the orange light. Naruto was taking the path to the orphanage that went by the local lake that was reflecting the sun's orange rays. Naruto liked this time of day because orange was simply his favorite color, and that's why he liked being out this time of day. In his mind, orange was the best color ever, and there was nothing anyone could say or do to make him think otherwise. As Naruto was walking, he looked over to the lake and saw a boat dock, and sitting on that boat dock, he saw a black-haired boy who looked around his age, sitting there looking incredible depressed if his facial expression was anything to go by. The boy seemed to sense he was being watched and turned around and made eye contact with Naruto. They held this stare for a bit before giving each other annoyed looks and turning away. Naruto was ready to keep walking on, but stopped when he started hearing what sounded like a faint voice in the back of his head, telling him to go back. Naruto was never really was one to be told what to do by anyone, but for some reason he felt like he should listen to this voice. The voice sounded almost familiar to him. This voice, like the warm feeling that would cover him, made him feel secure. He felt he could easily trust it with no fear of being betrayed or misguided. Naruto turned his head to look at the boy and saw more clear than ever the look on the boy's face. It reminded him of his own, the look of someone lonely. He may be 7, but he has seen that face enough to recognize it. Naruto turned around and began walking down the path to the lake's dock and quickly found himself sitting next to the boy, who looked at him confused on what he was doing. Naruto tuned to the black-eyed kid and flashed him a big grin before reaching out a hand to him. "Hi, I'm Naruto Uzumaki," chirped out the blonde, introducing himself. The boy looked between Naruto's face and his hand before hesitantly reaching out his own and placing it into Naruto's and giving it a shake. Sasuke Uchiha," introduced the black-haired quietly with an almost dead tone. "Oh, Uchiha, I think I have that name before. Aren't you the guys with those funny eyes, like those people I see around with those weird white pupilless eyes?" asked Naruto curiously. Sasuke glared at Naruto, which confused the blonde as on why no, our eyes are not like the Hyugas, they are way better, stated the young Uchiha boy pridefully. Naruto's face took a questioning expression. "Better? Why, can they do stuff or something?" Sasuke nodded. "Really?" asked Naruto, growing more interested. Again Sasuke nodded, smirking a little. "Like what? Is it something cool like if you look into someone's eyes you can read their mind, or or you can like shoot lasers from your eyes?" "No, wait, I bet it's something like being able to see the secret behind Ramen's awesomeness." And so Naruto went on to guess on what these eyes could do for a few minutes, not giving the Uchiha any room to give a vocal response. Sasuke just watched on with a comical deadpan expression, just choosing to shake his head and no at every failed guess. "Though, it would be cool if the Sharingan could shoot lasers," imagined Sasuke briefly, with his fully matured Sharingan shooting laser beams at Itachi, who was dogging them helplessly. Sasuke smirked at the thought. Naruto eventually ran out of guesses after the 29th, which was the crazes. "Yeah, I mean, what kind sense would it make for eyes to have the power to make a giant armored warrior who's made up of energy and could be controlled just by using your mind?" Naruto shaking his head at how ridiculous the thought was. Same time in a random location, the handsome man with long black hair tied in a ponytail, wearing a black and red cloud patterned cloak, sneezed suddenly, which caused him to lose his footing on a branch he had landed on, which caused him to trip and fall to the ground below in an ungraceful fashion and land face first and spread out on the ground. The man's fish-faced companion at the time was laughing uncontrollably at the sight, along with his sword, which was also somehow laughing. Same time afterlife, the bunch of deceased black-haired and black-eyed people sneezed at the same time, and all seemed surprised by that since it was the first time they all sneezed since they got here. Back with Naruto. "So what is so cool about your eyes then?" asked Naruto, finally giving up on the guessing game. Sasuke looked at Naruto thinking up what to say, but he didn't know what to say. Well, I don't know myself. I haven't awoken my eyes yet, answered Sasuke honestly, a little embarrassed that he didn't know much about his clan's own Dojutsu. Naruto raised a confused eyebrow. Awaken? Don't you just have them when you're summoned by the baby contract? Asked Naruto. Sasuke shook his head. No, you see the Sharingan, which is what it's called, has to have a trigger of sorts to awaken. For my clan's people, the most common way of doing it is apparently a life or death situation, which give a high emotional response to the brain, which release the special chakra that awaken the eyes. Well, that's what my I mean this one guy told me, explained Sasuke, avoiding the mention of his brother. Naruto acted like he didn't seem to notice this and just decided to leave it alone, feeling like it must be something too sensitive to mention. Well, that does sound annoying. Hey, how come I don't see any of you guys around the village much anymore? Asked Naruto. The whiskered blonde had not heard of the Uchiha massacre since no one really talked to him, so he was pretty much out of the loop of local news and intel. Sasuke tensed at the question, gaining a very disheartened expression at the mention of his clan. Sasuke looked at the boy and could see he didn't know what happened. It stunned him that there were still people who hadn't heard of what happened to his clan. The young Uchiha took a breath to calm his nerves. Gone, he said, simple, and turning to look down at the water below, looking at his own empty expression. Naruto was confused and was about to ask further, but stopped when he saw the sorrowful look on the boy's face, which made it click with Naruto what he meant. Naruto may be young, but he also knew what that look meant. Sasuke just kept looking off into space, becoming spaced out, with his mind beginning to bring back up the memories, but all that was halted when he felt a weight on his left shoulder and turned to see it was Naruto's hand. Sasuke looked at Naruto and saw he was giving him a light smile of comfort. This little gesture of comfort was some of the first he had gotten in a long time. People were either too afraid to try, or he had fangirls calling him cool because of his behavior these days, making him seem disinterested in others or anything. The trauma of that night had made Sasuke become isolated from others, not wanting to get attached to anyone out of fear that Itachi would try and kill them so that it would help stoke the fire of hate already lighting up inside of him. But this blonde boy was making him feel different about that fear. Sasuke was brought out of his musing. Boy, Naruto's voice. Hey, have you ever tried skipping stones? Asked Naruto, to which Sasuke shook his head and no good. Neither have I, so we will be on an even playing field. Then, come on, let's see who can skip their stones the furthest. Jeered Naruto, who surprised Sasuke by grabbing him by the wrist and starting to pull him along to look for an area by the lake that has some stones to skip. So Naruto and Sasuke then went on to compete to see who could skip stones the best. It was a constant neck and neck battle between them. They started off sinking the first stones, but by the end, they now had their stones doing at least a few smooth bounces on the water's surface. Sasuke couldn't help but have a small smile on his face. It had been a long time since he had any form of fun, and he found skipping stones like this was helping in taking his mind of that night. For the first time in a long time, his mind was becoming a bit more clear. Naruto was happy that he actually got to play with someone his own age and that he might have just made a friend. Though Naruto, not having the best history of making friends, felt he needed to confirm his hope. Hey, called out Naruto, getting the young Uchiha's attention. Can we? Began Naruto, sounding nervous. Maybe be friends? Asked Naruto, sounding very hopefully. Sasuke stared at Naruto, thinking over the boy's request of friendship. Sasuke was nervous about having a friend he didn't know. The next time Itachi might try to kill anyone who becomes close to Sasuke. But Naruto just seemed like someone who he didn't have to worry about that happening to. He seemed like he had this shadow behind him that would jump out and defend him if someone tried anything against him. This shadow didn't scare Sasuke, in fact it felt like it was welcoming him with open arms. It was nice, comforting even, but it was strange to feel like someone's own shadow was somehow befriending you just as much as the person itself. Sasuke saw that Naruto was still waiting patiently for his answer and could see he was growing more nervous. Yes, he said, simple and surprisingly easily for him. It didn't feel scary or difficult. I would like to be your friend, he said, further finding it felt good to call himself Naruto's friend. Naruto's eyes became hugely wide when he heard the Uchiha say he would like to be Naruto's friend. It made the blue-eyed boy gain a huge beaming smile, which was practically blinding to look at. Really, you mean it? He asked with voice filled with excitement, to which Sasuke nodded with an Uchiha smirk forming on his mouth. That's great, we are going to be the best of friend, I tell you. Oh, are you gonna be going to the ninja academy too? He asked, wondering if his new best friend was gonna become a ninja like him. Sasuke was glad to hear his new friend was also going to be going to the ninja academy too. It would give them something in common. Yeah, I am. I hope we'll be in the same class, commented Sasuke. Naruto nodded in agreement. Me too, we could train together, though I don't know any ninja moves yet, but I will learn, he said, sheepishly scratching the back of his head. He knew that his friend must have learned some ninja stuff from his clan before they become gone, as Sasuke put it. Sasuke was not surprised by this. His mother told him that not everyone in the village knows ninja stuff because not all of them have family members who become shinobi. That's alright, I only know one or two things myself, though I can breath a fireball, revealed Sasuke with a proud smirk on his face at the mention of that achievement. Naruto became amazed that his friend could do something that sounded so cool. Really? Can you show me please, please, please? Begged Naruto, really wanting to see it. It was like one of thing every little boy wanted to do but didn't know they wanted until now. Sasuke looked around, deciding not to do it here. He was always told by his family that he should keep his skills away from any prying eye. Information was half the battle, so they said no, not tonight, I'll show you another time, he said with a tone that told Naruto he would no be budging. Sasuke turned to look at Naruto, who now looked disappointed. So when do you want to hang out again? Asked Sasuke. Naruto's mood picked back up quick at the question. Do you want to meet tomorrow, here, at whatever time you're comfortable with, asked Naruto. Sasuke thought up a time that suited him. How about 8 or something? Told the young Uchiha, who got an okay nod from the blonde Uzumaki. Sasuke looked up to the darkening sky. Well, it's getting really late, I better go home, he said before beginning to walk off, waving to Naruto coolly as he did so. Naruto waved back as well, just more enthusiastically exited for tomorrow. Okay, see you then, best buddy. Cheered out the blonde before running back to the orphanage, exited to tell the matron about him making a new friend. On his way back to the orphanage, Naruto noticed people giving him dirty looks and whispering about him as usual, but tonight it was not affecting him because he was in way too much a good mood for it to be doing anything. Making it to the orphanage, Naruto opened the door and headed up to find the matron of the orphanage. He found her in the living room of the house, sitting on a rocking chair and feeding a baby that looked about a month or two old with bottled milk. Oh, hello Naruto, good to have you back safe and sound, but could you please possibly explain why you have been out till this late hour? Asked the elderly woman with a calm tone of voice, never looking up from the baby. It freaked Naruto out on how she could tell who you were without even needing to look at you. The elderly woman before Naruto was Nario Sato, the matron of the orphanage and a long since retired Jonin of Konoha. She was around during the time of Konoha's creation and had the pleasure of meeting the first 2 Hokages and was at a couple of points in time praised for her skill by them. She had fought and lived through all the shinobi wars, but sadly lost her husband to the second. Her very own child fought in the third war and died in it as well. After the third war, she decided to make use of her time and become the matron of the orphanage in Konoha. Helping raise these children has helped her just as much as she has been helping take care of them. Naruto hopped to the woman, still wearing a very happy look on his whiskered face. Well, Miss Sato, you won't believe it, I made a friend today. Cheered Naruto happily, his face shining with so much joy that it couldn't help but make the matron smile when she saw it. Oh, is that so? Please tell me about your new friend. Asked the elder woman, who was not showing it, but she was greatly excited to hear that the boy might have made a friend. She has watched as Naruto became an outcast and was upset to see him treated so unfairly by the villagers for something out of his control, making their children stay away from him out of lingering fear and unhealed grief. She knew the people in the village were still scarred by the Kyuubi event, but she had hoped they would not, but so afraid or as angry to the point that they would make this poor boy suffer for it. But I guess damage to the heart can never truly disappear, no matter how much time passes, it can only number get smaller, thought the matron. Naruto hopped onto one of cushion chairs before beginning. Well, his name is Sasuke Uchiha. He is from one of those clans, you know, the ones with funny eyes. I think he called it the Sharingan. Well, I saw him sitting all alone. I went up to him and we started talking and hit it off, recalled Naruto, keeping it quick but sounding vigorous all the way through. The matron was surprised to hear it was Sasuke who Naruto befriended. She knew of the boy, it was hard not to, lost all his family, his clan and all to his loving big brother in one single night and afterwards began to isolate himself from others, and here she was hearing her little Naruto had befriended him. She was amazed. Really Naruto, I must say I'm impressed. I heard that this boy was not a very social person, commented the matron in a still manner. Naruto nodded in agreement. I figured he doesn't seem like the type who likes to go around starting conversations. My dear, helped the matron, giving a light laugh at Naruto's struggle. Right, yeah, that word, finished Naruto, a little embarrassed at getting stuck on a big word, even if he was still 7. Naruto's face took a more sad look as he recalled something else, but I think something bad happened to Sasuke's clan, mentioned Naruto. Naruto's quickly understood where this was going. He told me they were gone. Do you know what that means? Asked Naruto. Naruto was thinking on how best to tell Naruto in a way he would best understand. Well, Naruto, Sasuke is also an orphan like you now, said the matron, putting it as kindly as possible in order to spare his young mind of any terrible or overly depressing details. She didn't want to tell Naruto all the details, like all the death and gruesome scenes that were left after that night, and especially the part of it being Sasuke's brother who turned the young Uchiha into an orphan. If he wanted to talk about it, he would tell Naruto himself. Naruto's gaze met the floor. Oh, so that's how it is. I can't imagine what it must feel like to have lost so much, but do you really mean it, like all his clan is gone, no one else left? Is it just him now? Asked Naruto, who got a confirming nod. Naruto felt bad for Sasuke, but thought what Sasuke most likely needed right now wasn't someone pitying him or feeling sorry for him all the time. He felt if he was in Sasuke's place he wouldn't want to be always looked at in pity all the time, treated like some weak fragile creature all the time. It would make him feel more low being seen that way. Naruto decided he wanted to go to bed. He was feeling tired from the day. As he was about to exit the door he stopped when he heard the matron say, "And Naruto, I'm glad you have made a friend. Having friends is something greatly important. It helps build character when you have made yourself some true bonds to value. Even if those bonds break one day you will always have the memories of the good times spent together to value in your heart and mind," preached the old matron wisely with a loving tone. Naruto stared at the matron who was still feeding the baby in her arms, trying to fully comprehend what she meant, but his young mind was able to only grasp so much. "Don't worry lad, you will get it one day. Just remember my words, okay?" ensured Naruto, lifting her head to look at the young blonde who just nodded and left to go to bed, his mind still trying to process not just the elderly lady's words, but everything else he had learned today. Naruto went up the stairs and headed to his individual room. There was not much inside, just a single person bed by a window, some drawers to keep his clothes, a fox plushie which he can't help but like, but everyone else seems to hate, and coloring books that he colored mostly orange, just for the sake of orange itself. Naruto went to his drawers and pulled out some striped pajamas and a nightcap and quickly changed into them, discarding his day cloths to the floor in an uncaring manner and climbed under the dark orange sheets of his quilt. Before drifting off to sleep Naruto grabbed his fox plushie and snuggled up to it, signing contentedly he liked its orange fur, finding it soft and awesome. As Naruto laid there in his bed he began to feel the familiar warm sensation envelop him, but there was something different this time. The feeling felt like it was tugging him gentle and felt like it was smoothly pulling him into what? He didn't know, but he didn't fight it. Why should? It's never harmed him or threatened him, it's only ever helped him and made him feel better because of it. When the tugging stopped Naruto began to feel wet. Opening his blue eyes the young blonde looked around and found his surrounding had drastically changed. "Where the hell am I?" exclaimed Naruto, beginning to freak out. Something about this was saying that this wasn't a dream. Naruto looked to have found himself in some sort of deep underground sewer system of some sort, with the walls lined with huge metal pipes, some having steam spraying out of them. "Come this way," whispered a voice through the darkness of the tunnel. Naruto jumped at the sound of voice, but settled down when he realized it sounded familiar and had any fear or worry inside of beginning to be replaced by a sheer curiosity of what the source of the familiar voice was. "This way, follow the line," Naruto called out the voice again, and true to its word, before Naruto appearing out of thin air was a silver glowing line just floating in the air, swaying gentle and continuing on into the shadows of the tunnel. Naruto reached out and touched the line and gasped when he felt that same warm comforting feeling coming from it. It felt like everything was coming together. Suddenly the silver string tied itself around Naruto's wrist and began tugging him along down the dark tunnel. Naruto was briefly surprised by this, but just decided to let it happen and not put up a fight. After a couple of minutes Naruto began to see a light at the end of the tunnel and had to cover his eyes from the glare of the light when he exited it. When Naruto uncovered his eyes he was shocked by what he saw. It was not more sewer systems like the young boy was assuming, what was before him was more like a garden. But there was more. The garden looked to be coming out of an endless still surface of water that looked to go on forever and was crystal clear. There was a sky, it was colored soft black, not exactly like a night sky, but lighter in shade. Everything was lit up by what looked to be floating balls of light just hovering and floating everywhere, with no real pattern or flight path. Naruto looked down and gaped when he found he was actually walking on the water's surface. He was knocked out of his amazement of himself when the silver line tugged on him again. As the boy was being guided across the water Naruto reached out with his free hand and poked one of the floating light balls that came into his reach and laughed when it popped like a mini firework. Soon Naruto found his bare yet dry feet upon grass, and when he did the string faded away into nothing. Naruto looked himself over, only now noticing that he was completely dry, not a drop of water on him. "Weird," he said to himself. "Well, if you think that's weird then you, my boy, are going to find the very world you live in to be full-blown crazy," came an amused male voice. Naruto's head immediately snapped up, his eyes darting around seeking out the source of that familiar voice. After a few seconds Naruto found his eyes landing on a silhouetted figure sitting under the shade of a tall tree. As Naruto stared at the figure he found his gaze met when the figure opened his eyes. He found his blue orbs met with a pair crimson-red ones, possessing 3 small spinning tomo markings on the red iris surface. "Hello Naruto, it's nice to finally meet you," spoke the figure warmly to the young Jinchuriki, despite his intimidating position in the shadows. "Host and tenant number 1 finally meet, and he possesses the Sharingan." Naruto stared at the shadowy, its glowing Sharingan piercing through the darkness cast by the tree. The young boy had yet to utter a single word, he just stared, unmoving. Trapped like a deer in the headlights. He was powerfully intimidated by the way the figure was looking at him from the cover of the shadows, with those glowing crimson eyes. On the other hand, he sounded kind and welcoming to him. much in the same way as the old man and Tucci would greet him. It was all such a contrasting mien. Looking frightening as hell while sounding as nice as the sunshine after heavy rain. The shaded figure seemed to spot his nervousness and seemed to finally realize why. Oh. Sorry, Naruto. I must look absolutely terrifying just sitting here in the shade like this with my eyes turned on, said the figure sounding quite embarrassed with himself. I swear sometimes I forget I've even got them switched on, he. Now aware of himself, the figure deactivated his Sharingan, which revealed that the man had a pair of light brown eyes with light showings off golden yellow around the rims. The figure shifted, his legs crossing as he seemed to lean slightly more forward. Seeing the unnerving red orbs now gone, Naruto released a breath he didn't even know he was keeping inside. He seemed much less menacing now to the 7-year-old. Thanks, those things were, scary. I've seen them before you know, but never like that, said Naruto, rubbing the back of his head every so often as he fought to not trip or stumble over his words. Naruto cocked his head slightly at the man under the tree. If I'm right, that was the Sharingan, wasn't it? He asked, now slightly more relaxed, his hand falling back to his side. Some white split open under the eyes of the figure, his teeth showing through the shade in what could only be called a sharp smile. Why yes, it was, how sharp of you to notice, praised the unnamed man. It made Naruto feel slightly good to be praised like that, even if it was just for such a simple thing as recognizing something he'd seen before. Thanks, he muttered, a hand rubbing his neck, a nervous smile appearing on his face. This was all so weird, his eyes pulled away from the figure and looked around at the woods for a second before looking back at the shadow. The Uzumaki stared at him for a drawn-out minute, a question forming in his mind. The longer he stared, the more the question forced its way down to the tip of his tongue. Until it broke loose. Who are you? Asked the boy, now realizing he didn't even know who this person was. Also, where the hell am I to? Though wherever I am it's pretty sweet, mused the young lad, amazed by the place's epic appearance, like something out of a fantasy story. The garden looked like a big plot of land covered in lush green grass. From what the boy could see in front of him and around him, there were big trees growing in certain spots, enough so that it didn't obscure anything in the distance. Off into the distance, Naruto could spot a pool of sorts. Close by said pool looked to be a small traditional dojo-like building about a story tall, being held up off the ground thanks to some wooden beams fixed into its structure. There looked to be more stuff over there like some statues, but they were too far away for any real detail to made out. The figure seemed to laugh at the boy's question, knocking him out of his intake of his surroundings. Well, is it not rude to ask me my name when you yourself haven't first introduced yourself, countered the man with wry amusement. Naruto flinched a little, feeling like he was being rude by not having first introduced himself, but then realized that the mystery man already seemed to know his name. Hey. You said my name before I even told you. So do I even need to tell you? Oh. And wait a sec. How do you even know my name in the first place, huh? Just who the hell are you? Yelled Naruto frantically, pointing an accusing and shaky finger at the shadow man. The figure sighed, calm down kid, I haven't brought you here to get interrogated, nor have I brought you here to harm you in any way. The man lifted his silhouetted hands up in a calm down gesture. So relax and introduce yourself. Not just your name, tell me a bit about yourself. Stuff like your likes, dislikes, maybe some of your dreams or hopes, stuff like that's what I really want to hear, he explained in a laid-back manner, holding no ill intent at all as he spoke. The shaded man then seemed to relax further back into the tree he was laying against. One shadowed hand lifted up and waved a little at the silent Naruto. Hello. Cat got your tongue or something? Naruto was just frozen in surprise that someone was interested in getting to know him. Though that quickly disappeared when a vain throbbing appeared at being made fun of by the mystery man. No. I was just thinking about what to say, that's all. Not everyone just knows what to say when given a question like that all of a sudden. So give me a minute, will ya? Yelled out the whiskered boy. Naruto's rant only seemed to amuse the man being yelled at. The boy scowled at that. Hey, stop laughing, it's not funny. Shouted Naruto, gritting his teeth at the man while puffing out visible steam from his nostrils. The shaded man lifted up his hands in surrender. Okay, I'll stop if I can, it's just that reaction was priceless, so I couldn't really help it. Alright, explained the man, not at all sounding sorry. He let out an exaggerated breath. Okay, I'm good now, so will you please? He asked, nicely. Naruto stared, arms folded, muttering to himself about stupid shadow men, before deciding to stop and get to introducing himself. Okay, I will, but you have to promise to tell me who you are after, okay? He demanded. He got an agreeing nod. Naruto unfolded his arms and walked a bit closer to the figure and sat down on the grass that was just before the start of the tree's sizable shadow. Naruto took a deep breath before starting. Okay. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, Dadabeo. And I like ramen, the color orange, the old man, Miss Sato, the Ichirakus and my new friend. He has eyes or is gonna have eyes just like yours one day. Cheered out Naruto, pointing at the man in the shadow who hummed in understanding. Naruto's face then took on a childish scrunched up look. Despite that though there was a sad flash in his eyes. His voice dipped. I don't like it when people look at me funny, whisper about me, call me names and pick on me he said, giving an annoyed huff at the end. Oh. And I don't like the time it takes for ramen to cook. That's the worst finished Naruto, nodding his head when mentioning the last one, as if it really, truly, was the worst thing in his life. The man hummed. And what of your dreams, your hopes for the future, you have some of those do you not, Naruto? Asked the man, simply. Naruto's blue eyes widened, he rubbed the back of his head, laughing sheepishly, as he did. Oops, forgot that part, my bad, confessed Naruto, his mouth in a grin and his eyes closed tightly shut. The man laughed a little at the boy's unneeded embarrassment. It's okay, no need to get embarrassed now, he assured. Okay, said Naruto, coming down from his brief bout of bashfulness instantly and picking up where he left off. Okay, so my dream is to become the best ninja ever, and any hopes, well I hope to make some really awesome friends. I don't need many, just some true friends, that's all. Like today I made a friend and I think me and him are gonna be the best of friends. I can feel it. And I bet we'll be great ninjas too. Ah, I see. It's nice that you have such a friend, Naruto, and I'm sure you and Sasuke will go on and do great things, said the man in an almost knowing tone that Naruto failed to pick up on. Naruto smiled big, folded his arms and started nodding enthusiastically. Yep, I bet we will, me and him are gonna be the UG. How did you know I was talking about Sasuke? Asked Naruto, feeling a bit more unnerved by the man. Has he been watching me or something? Thought Naruto, scared by the idea that someone has been spying on him. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to say that all of a sudden, it just sort of slipped out. Well, I guess I better clear a few things up before you start thinking I'm some sort of crazy person who just goes around watching people confess to figure, nervously laughing a little at himself. If you wouldn't mind please, requested Naruto, with a growing worry about this man. He didn't like the thought of being spied on. The figure breathed a sigh of relief at seeing the boy wasn't getting angry at him or full-blown terrified either. He nodded. Okay, I guess first I'll get out of this shadow here so you can get a good look at me, said the man before he got up and started walking out of the tree's shade. Once out of the shade, standing before Naruto was a youthful looking man, his skin was a little light and he was about nearly 6 foot tall. He possessed a head of long wavy white hair that brushed at just about his shoulders, falling over the sides of his face with a bang resting on the bridge of his nose. He wore a white kimono shirt with slightly flared sleeves that cut just before his wrists and was tied close by a red silk sash around his waist. He wore black baggy trousers which had some crimson tape wrapped around the shins, and finally he was wearing some black shinobi boots. The man looked down at the spiky blonde boy and flashed him a toothy smile. Hi Naruto, my name is Hirofumi, and I'm kind of a tenant of yours, introduced the man, his hands in his trouser pockets. Naruto looked at the man, confused on what he meant. A tenant? What's that? He asked, not getting the new word he just heard. Hirofumi hummed at seeing that he didn't know the word's definition. Well, a tenant is someone who lives somewhere that is owned by someone else. Naruto nodded, getting what the man was explaining. Okay, and how are you a tenant of mine? He asked, still not seeing how this tied in with him. He's 7, he owns nothing like that. Or so he was assuming. Hirofumi was laughing in a way that was starting to make Naruto nervous. Well, you see, I'm sort of living inside of you, he revealed, Hirofumi. Deciding to just go ahead and drop that huge bombshell right there, unable to think of a more gentler way of revealing it. It worked, for him at least. Hirofumi was now feeling a lot less nervous and tense now that he had that off his chest. Naruto, on the other hand, was now shaking, twitching and awkwardly laughing at the man who was just looking at him with a calm, unwavering smile. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Because, I think I misheard you, it almost sounded like haha, you said you were living inside of me, asked Naruto, who was now beginning to sweat bullets. The white-haired man began to scratch his cheek, looking off to the side, and continued to laugh. This time more carefreely. He nodded. Yeah, I did, and I've made quite the place here, don't you think? Said the man nonchalantly as Naruto's jaw dropped and his skin turned deathly pale. Naruto remained unmoving for a few minutes, his young brain working insanely fast to try and work out how this was even possible. After a few minutes, his mind made it to the one and only logical conclusion. Ghost. He suddenly screamed at the very peak of his lungs, pointing at the man and startling him. The white-haired man stared at the shaking finger being pointed up at him and then to its equally trembling owner and started rubbing his own chin. Humming. I guess you're not wrong, I have been dead for a long time, so I guess I'm what you would title as a ghost, he spoke in a tone of thought. Naruto was now as pale as the moon. Before Hirofumi could say anything to console the boy, said boy was already running around back and forth, now yelling about being haunted by a vengeful spirited. I'm not a vengeful spirit, Hirofumi muttered out with a deadpan expression. His eyes following the boy back and forth. Like watching a game of tennis. Naruto didn't seem to listen though, and just continued to run around like a headless chicken, ironically making it seem like he really was possessed by something. In the meantime, the ghost decided to just take a seat on the grass and watch the sight before him, uncaring. He decided to just wait it out and see if the boy will come back to his senses on his own. 10 minutes later, by the power of Raymond, I compel you. By the power of Raymond, I compel you. Was what Naruto was now chanting at the ghost seated in front of him, who was looking on really unimpressed. Does he really think he can expel me from his body by such a ridiculous means? Furthermore, does he really worship Raymond that much? Inwardly questioned the man. Feeling he had now had enough of the boy trying to exorcise him, if it even had any right to be called that. Hirofumi put his left hand into a hand seal, his cheeks then bulged out, which confused the blonde directly in front of him. A fist-sized bowl of water came shooting out of Hiro's mouth and straight into the shocked face of Naruto, knocking the young boy straight onto his back. Naruto, flailing on the floor, started wiping the water furiously off of his face and out of his eyes, while also spitting out a small stream of water that got into his mouth. Once he could see clearly, he glared at the man who was now smirking at him. "Are you done now?" asked the ghost, his arms folded. Naruto shook his head defiantly. "No way. I'm not stopping until I kick you out, no way I'm being possessed by some stupid ghost," he said, sounding utterly determined. Hiro sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose in a tired manner. "Listen Naruto, I'm not possessing you, nor am I planning to either," he said, honesty clear in his voice as he spoke. Naruto still looked pretty skeptical. "Do you mean it? You're not here to take over my body?" he asked, trying to sound tough, and would have worked for the most part if Hirofumi was a child. Hirofumi shook his head at the question, smirking as he did. Yeah, I mean a kid, this isn't like some horror story. I'm not some big bad evil spirit who has come to possess you and make you do evil stuff or something." Naruto began to calm down a little, but still looked on, not entirely trusting the spirit before him. "Okay then, if you aren't here to possess me, then what are you doing here? Also, where is here anyway?" asked the spiky blonde, looking around at his surroundings again. "Well, we're inside of you right now," the blonde snapped back to look at Hiro, disbelief clear on the boy's face. "This place is called your mindscape, it's sort of like a room in your soul, everyone like you has one, well a bigger one given circumstances," explained the man smoothly, choosing his words well. Naruto was amazed at hearing this. "This place is inside me? It's so amazing, I can't believe it." Naruto continued to look on, taking in as much as he could see. His blue eyes sparkling in wonder. "So all this is inside my soul or something," whispered the young Jinchuriki to himself, still captivated by the world around him. The white-haired man chuckled, humored by the child's awe of the place. "Yep, this is all inside your soul Naruto, the core of your chakra," he confirmed. Naruto grinned at the man but then lost it and raised a questioning eyebrow. "Wait, but how did you get in here then?" he asked curiously, his head leaning slightly at the man. Hirofumi's face lost any amusement and was replaced by a more severe and subdued one. "I was hoping we could have avoided that particular question for a bit longer," he sighed out, rubbing his head as he did. Naruto looked at the man, worried by his sudden shift in mood. Hiro's eyes sharpened on him. "Tell me Naruto, do you know of the Kyuubi attack that happened 7.5 years ago?" asked Hirofumi, who got a nod from the young child. "How much do you know?" Naruto began scratching his head lightly in thought, trying to recall what he learned from people he managed to overhear talking about it. Well, there was apparently this huge as hell fox with 9 equally huge tails. It really banged up the village and hurt lots of people while doing so, and also, a lot of people died, explained Naruto, spreading his arms wide when he was describing its size, but growing sad at the mention of people dying. But Naruto brightened up suddenly, "But that big bad fox was stopped by the 4th Hokage and was never seen again after that. Must have been sent packing with its tails between its legs or something," cheered out Naruto, punching the air in front of him as if he was fighting something. Hirofumi chuckled at the sight, only making him feel sadder at what he was gonna be telling the boy, only making him hope more that Naruto would stay this positive afterwards. Letting out another sigh, Hirofumi steeled himself before speaking. "Well, Naruto, you are right, the 4th did beat the fox, but it was not sent simply packing," he said, getting the blonde's attention, who looked at him confused. "Naruto, come with me," ordered the white-haired man, who got back up on his feet and started walking in the direction of the pool by the dojo. Naruto stared questioningly for a second before chasing after the man. "Hey, wait up." He called out to Hiro, to which the spirit stopped to let the blonde catch up. After the 7-year-old caught up, they both continued on walking to the pond. Once there, Hirofumi asked Naruto to sit down next to him. Now they were both sitting by the pond watching the still crystal water. The pond was 10 feet in diameter and was perfectly circular, with a pair of small streams of water flowing in from a river that was cutting through the land some distance away from the dojo. The pool's depth seemed bottomless. Naruto stared at the pool, focusing hard on seeing if there was a bottom. If there was, Naruto couldn't see it. Naruto called out, Hirofumi, gaining the boy's attention. "Let me educate you about the Kyuubi." Naruto nodded dumbly. Okay," he said in an unsure tone, but still wanted to hear what the man had to say to him about the fox. Hirofumi nodded and reached out his hand and waved it over the water of the pond. After he did so, an image began to ripple into existence on the water's surface. Once the image still did show the 9 tails, not in a threatening or scary form, it was simply just laying down with its tails spread out and looking bored as all hell. Naruto stared at the image, amazed by the color of its fur so orange he whispered to himself. Hirofumi chuckled when he heard that. Good job, I picked this one. Don't want to show him what you look like when you're in a really bad mood. He likely wouldn't be so positive about you. So the Kyuubi, also known as the 9 tails, or giant super fox or fox king or super plushie, cheered out Naruto. Hirofumi stared blankly at the boy for a second. Well, that's a new one, good job, I like it, said the white-haired man, deciding to just roll with it and give the boy a thumbs up. Okay, so the 9 tails has been around for a long time, way before Konoha was even an idea, explained Hirofumi to Naruto, who whistled at hearing this. Naruto turned to look back at the image of the fox. Wow, he must be like super old then. The ghost nodded with his hands resting on his knees. Yes he is, and he's seen a lot and also knows quite a lot to boot. Naruto turned and looked back at the man with a confused stare. You see, the Kyuubi is not simply an animal like most people assume him to be. He thinks and feels just like you and I or anybody else does, explained the man looking at the image sadly. Don't you, Kurama? The young Uzumaki turned back to the image of the Kyuubi. Really? He does. So then why did he attack Konoha? Did we do something bad to him to make him angry? Asked Naruto. The older man rubbed his chin at the question. Yes and no, he said, which got Naruto giving him a what kind of look. On both accounts of the Kyuubi attacking Konoha, he was never doing it of his own free will. You see, he was being what you could call mind controlled by someone on each account. Naruto stared at Hirofumi, totally shocked at hearing this. No way. You're telling me there are people out there that can control something like him? Yelled Naruto, pointing to the image of the Kyuubi, finding it very hard to believe. Naruto got a nod from the man. You have got to be kidding me. Look at him, he's gigantic. Who or what is that much power? Asked a blonde, frantically, not able to make sense of it. Hirofumi's eyes looked at Naruto and back at the image on the water and back again. Sometimes Naruto, it's not the one with the most power who conquers the strong. You see, there are a few methods out there for controlling beings like the Kyuubi, and there are people out there who possess those very methods. These techniques take complete control of the victim. As you can imagine, it's very degrading and all-round humiliating to be used like a puppet, explained the white-haired Sharingan user. Naruto looked at the fox's image, feeling actual sympathy for him. The thought of someone doing that to him made him feel sick. So you're saying that someone made him attack the village and he had no way of stopping himself? He asked, his voice carrying pity. No, he couldn't. He was under someone's complete control, and when he was finally released, it's my belief that he was far too enraged to even know what he was attacking anymore, said Hirofumi, explaining further solemnly. Naruto looked up at the man. He was that angry, huh? He sounds like a grouch, looks like one too, commented Naruto, pointing at the image. The man chuckled at that comment. Haha kid, you have no idea how right you are, he replied, rubbing the boy's spiky mop of hair. After being done rubbing the boy's head, he picked up the discussion. So after being released from the man's control, the fourth came along to deal with the Kyuubi the only way possible, he said, his voice now gaining a more severe edge to it. Naruto looked at the man, getting excited at the mention of the fourth battling the fox. Oh, you know how the fight went. How did the fourth beat the Kyuubi? Asked Naruto, leaning in closer to hear. The Sharingan user smiled a little at the boy's excitement, all the while hoping that he will take it all well in the end. To tell you that, I will have to tell you what chakra is first. Have you heard of chakra before, Naruto? Asked Hirofumi. Naruto nodded. Yeah, I've heard of chakra before. Chakra, corrected Hirofumi. That's what I said, Chakra, responded young Naruto imminently, sounding very certain in his pronunciation and nodding to himself. Meanwhile, Hirofumi just stared deadpan before just cracking an amused smile. Okay Naruto, please tell me what you already know of chakra. Asked the white-haired man. Naruto looked at the man now like he was stupid. Now you're the one saying it wrong. It's not chakra, it's chakra. I thought you were the one teaching me stuff, said Naruto, frowning with his arms folded. Now Hirofumi was heavily dumbstruck. Did he just try to correct me and still get it wrong? Shaking his head, Hirofumi exited his thoughts and decided to just roll with it. Right, chakra, my bad, I must have slipped up, he said, correcting himself. Naruto smiled up, innocently oblivious to his own faults in all of this. It's okay, I make those kinds of mistakes sometimes, like I get stuck on big words, said the young blonde, laughing innocently with a grin on his face. The ghost just smirked, humored by the blonde's attitude. Right, so tell me, what do you know about chakra, Naruto? Asked the man again. Naruto picked himself up a little at the question and began donning a look of deep thought, rubbing his chin a little. Well, I know it's that stuff ninjas use to perform awesome jutsus, and I think other stuff as well, said Naruto, revealing all he knew about chakra in one sentence. Okay, I guess that's something. You at least know who it's mostly used by and what it's used for most of the time, but let me tell you about it in a bit more detail, said the ghost man, who got an okay from the whiskered boy, sounding really interested in the subject of chakra. The man once again waved his hand over the water and a diagram rippled into existence, displaying a human shape with a yin-yang circle on his abdomen area. This here shows the two key elements in which chakra is made up of. You see Naruto, chakra is made from mixing together two different energies called the physical and spiritual. The physical energies stem from our bodies, whereas the spiritual comes from the soul and mind, explained Hirofumi, who turned to the boy. Did you get that so far? He asked and got a nod. The white-haired man waved his hand over the diagram, and the split yin-yang circle began to spin and merge together until it became one and lit up an azure blue chakra. The chakra started to spread out in lines forming a network on the blank humanoid shape. What you see here is what's known as the chakra pathway system or chakra network for short. It's what moves chakra around one's body like a river, or how veins carry blood. Each one of these little lines you see are what's called a chakra coil. These coils are what the chakra flow through. They are also attached to little nodes called the tenketsu points. There are roughly 361 major nodes, and then countless others on a cellular level. All that together forms the chakra network, explained the man as best as he could for the boy to understand. Naruto looked at the diagram for a bit longer, soaking in all the man had just told him, before turning to look back up at the adult next to him. Okay, I think I get it. This chakra network moves chakra around the body, and without it no would be able to use chakra, right? Asked Naruto, getting a confirming nod and a pleased smile from the man next. Hirofumi waved his hand over the water, and the same image of the fox was now next to the chakra diagram. I am glad you are able to understand the basics of how chakra works and what it is. This will make it easier to explain this next part. Hirofumi took a breath before starting. You see, the reason the Kyuubi has been able to be around for so long, because he is, for a lack of a better word, immortal, he revealed, which after he did made Naruto gasp in surprise. What? Really, he's immortal? Asked Naruto. Hiro nodded. Yes, he is, about as immortal as it gets. If he gets destroyed he will eventually return. You see, the Kyuubi is made up entirely of raw chakra, and you can't kill chakra. His words surprised Naruto further. Naruto's mind was working to make sense of it when a question popped up and his expression grew serious. Wait, if the fox cannot be killed, then how was he stopped 7 years ago by the fourth? Asked Naruto, who grew nervous when he saw the ghost's expression darken slightly. Hirofumi steeled himself for what was to come next. I guess this is the final leg. Well, you can't destroy chakra, but it can be sealed away, like a kunai into a scroll, or like putting water into a bottle and fastening the lid tightly shut. That is what the fourth did with the Kyuubi, explained the man who could see Naruto was beginning to tense up. Right now Naruto was growing anxious. Something inside him was telling him that wherever Hiro was going with this he wasn't going to like it. Though when sealing away something like the Kyuubi, a simple scroller object just won't cut it, and even if there was some simple object that could hold the Kyuubi it wouldn't last long. The best place to seal a chakra beast is into something living, like a person. Hirofumi then turned and looked Naruto dead in the eyes. Better yet, a newborn baby, finished Hirofumi. After Hirofumi finished his sentence, Naruto's eyes grew wide, everything now beginning to fall into place for him. The stares, the whispers, the dirty looks, the parents telling their children to stay away from him, all the hurtful names, the looks of pity and guilt from the old Hokage, the matron, the Ichirokas, it all began to make perfect sense. I'm the Kyuubi, he whispered out, tears streaming down his whiskered face, looking at the image of the fox in the water, frozen in place, watching as his reflection and the fox's image overlapped one another. Naruto was stopped in going any deeper into his dark thoughts by the feeling of a hand being placed on his shoulder. When he turned around he saw Hirofumi. The look in his eyes captivated him. There was no judgment in them, no hatred, no loathing or fear, just pure acceptance. The ghost shook his head. No, you've got it wrong, Naruto, that's not what I'm saying at all. You are not the Kyuubi, you are Naruto Uzumaki. The Kyuubi's been sealed within you, you have not become him, you and he are two completely separate beings, and you both will and forever be that way, always, ensured Hiro, in a tone that was a mix of stern and comforting. Naruto looked back down at the image of the fox, still not sure whether what the man was saying was true or not. How can you be sure that I'm not? Look at it, it's so strong and I'm just weak little me. How can I be sure that I'm even me? Argued Naruto, his voice cracking with uncertainty. It just made no sense to him how someone as small and puny as him could possibly hold back something as strong and mighty as the Kyuubi. Hirofumi sent a comforting smile to the boy when he turned back to look at him. I'm certain because I've been here since the day he was sealed within you, and I've been watching over him ever since, keeping him asleep, plus the seal placed on you by the fourth is extremely strong, and you yourself, Naruto, are stronger than you think, he explained smoothly, no ounce of doubt present in his voice as he spoke. Naruto began to feel a bit more reassured in his identity after the little talk from Hiro. Really, you mean it? He got a positive nod and a confident smile. Naruto began to smile as well, though it wasn't back in full. You said the fourth sealed the fox inside me, why me though? Why not someone else? Asked the blonde, desperate to know why it had to be him, why it had to be unfair to him. The spirit closed his eyes for a second to allow himself a minute to think. I could say it was because you were his son, but I don't think you are ready to hear that just yet. He doesn't need that kind of pressure right now. He opened his eyes. Well, Naruto, you were the only child available at that time, and the safest choice as well. Your chakra coils were fresh and new, so they would grow to handle the Kyuubi's powerful chakra much quicker. Add on top of that, when you were born, you already possessed stronger chakra than most, good enough to suppress the 9 tails. All that kid made you a star choice to be the Kyuubi's host. Naruto, you were the only one strong enough who could hold the Kyuubi, no one else. If anyone else was picked, I hate to think what could have happened, explained Hiro, keeping his tone soft but serious. Naruto's mood seemed to perk up after his explanation. So I was the only one strong enough, eh? I was picked because I was the best, not just at random. Asked Naruto, to which Hirofumi nodded. So I've protected the village since the day I was born, man. I'm awesome. Cheered Naruto, feeling better now knowing he was picked because he was the only one strong enough to hold the Kyuubi. It made him feel special knowing he was made the 9 tails host because he was the only one who could be made its host. Man, I rule. I've been holding back something as strong as the Kyuubi, and when I was a baby too. Oh. Raymond, I'm the king. Thought the young blonde, beginning to grin a little. But Naruto's grin began to fade and was being replaced again by another sad expression. Hirofumi grew concerned seeing this shift back into sadness after it seemed that Naruto was finally beginning to come out of it. What's the matter, Naruto? He asked in a worried tone as he placed his hand on the little blonde's back. Naruto continued to look down at the pond as he spoke. Well, it's just the people in the village, they know I keep the Kyuubi away, but they all look at me like I'm a monster. Why do they do that? They must know I'm not the Kyuubi, right? Asked the blue-eyed boy, sounding very depressed and crushed. Hirofumi released a tired sigh at the mention of the villagers. They did not understand, and even if they did, their feelings towards the Kyuubi blinded them from seeing the kind young boy that was really there. They don't understand, Naruto, he said sadly but genuinely. Naruto looked up at him with an irritated frown on his face, glaring daggers at the man. That's exactly the same thing the old man always keeps telling me anytime I ask this. What don't they understand? What is so hard to understand? I get it, and I'm not even a grown-up. I thought grown-ups were supposed to be smart. Yelled out Naruto, his frustrations and confusion coming to the surface. Hirofumi sighed, understanding the boy's feelings. From his point of view, adults are supposed to know everything and understand everything. Well, Naruto, adults are not perfect, they don't know all there is about the world, and if they do understand one thing, their feelings towards it can get in the way of their better judgment on it, as is with you. Some may not understand that you and Fox are 2 separate beings, despite how close you are to him, or that their hatred and fear of the Kyuubi is blinding them from truly seeing you, Naruto, he explained in a voice of sympathy and honesty. Naruto looked back down at the pond's water, another wave of sadness replacing his anger. That sounds sad, that they still feel like that about the fox. He must have hurt a lot of people for them to still feel that way after so much time has passed, said the young Jinchuriki, feeling sorry for all those who are still hurting inside, more than he was for himself. Hirofumi smiled down, amazed that Naruto could show such sympathy for the villagers after all they've put him through. You really are something special, Naruto, he thought, proud of the boy in front of him. The ghost clapped his hands together, snapping the boy out of his thoughts and gaining his attention. Well, don't worry about them, in time I'm sure they'll change their view of you and begin to see the young man that you'll become, but until then just have as much fun as you can. You only get one childhood, exploit the freedom for all it's worth, prank everyone in a 20-mile radius if you want. Help pull this Sasuke boy along for the ride, it'll make for some amazing memories to share, that I'm sure. Cheered out Hirofumi, his words seemed to get to Naruto, who shot up onto his feet like a spring. Clenching his fists and putting on a huge toothy grin, Naruto began to speak with excess vigor. Yeah, you're right. I should have fun. I can worry about all that people acknowledging me stuff later. For now I'm gonna have fun with my friends. Well, friend, but I'm still gonna have fun either way. I don't care if the people see me as the fox because I'm Naruto Uzumaki and no one can tell me otherwise, Dadabeo. Roared out Naruto, pointing his thumb to himself while sending out a near blinding smile. Hirofumi laughed heartily at the boy's spunk and had his eyes closed while doing so. In doing so, he didn't see the mischievous grin form on Naruto's face as his eyes shifted to the side. The whole pranking everyone within a 20-mile radius sounds like an interesting idea. Having Sasuke's help in doing it would make it more fun, but it'll take time and it might take some convincing to get him to join. We will need to be stronger and more skilled before we can fulfill such a goal effectively and with a higher chance of success within a shinobi village, thought Naruto like a young evil mastermind. Naruto, coming out of his plan hatching, looked around and something just struck him. Hey Hirofumi, if there really is a giant orange fox living inside of me, where is it? I don't see him anywhere, asked the boy, looking in every possible direction. The man in question was now smirking proudly. Well, Naruto, I decided to put him somewhere private and quiet so he could have sweet dreams with no disturbances. If you want I can take you to him. He offered, sounding pretty cheerful and proud of himself. Naruto nodded, wanting to see the second tenet of his body, plus wanting to see with his own eyes if a huge nine-tailed fox was actually dwelling within him. Hirofumi stood up and gestured for Naruto to take his hand, to which the boy did. "Okay Naruto, I want you to know that you don't need to hold your breath," informed the man. Hirofumi's words confused the boy before suddenly being pulled into the pool by Hiro, who suddenly jumped in not a second after speaking. Once completely submerged in the water, Naruto was freaking out and panicking, but after a second or two of kicking and flailing about he realized something. He could breathe. And that no water was actually entering his mouth or lungs. It confused him on how this was even happening. Hirofumi turned back to the young blonde and smiled in amusement. "Well, I did say you didn't have to hold your breath now, didn't I?" teased the white-haired man. Speaking perfectly through the water as if it wasn't even there. Naruto glared daggers at the man for this. "Well, you should have given me more of a heads up than you don't need to hold your breath and then suddenly just go jumping in, also what kind of warming is that, huh?" retorted Naruto sarcastically. The blonde's berating just seemed to amuse the man more. "Oh come now Naruto, you're inside your own soul, you're not going to drown here, that should have been obvious even for one as young as yourself," teased the man again with a cheeky grin. Naruto tried to think up a comeback but just puffed out and turned his head away from the man, making Hirofumi laugh at the kid's cute little pout. To be a parent, I wish I had that again," he briefly thought sadly. Naruto just let the man pull him down into the depths of the bottomless pond, letting the cold water wash over him. As they got deeper and deeper, the water seemed to start growing warmer and warmer. The Uzumaki started to see bubbles floating past as they got deeper. Naruto noticed that the walls of the pond seemed to be illuminating, giving light as they descended deeper. After a bit more time, the pair reached the end of the dive and fell into what seemed like a huge poorly lit room with 3 solid blank stone walls. On the far end of the room stood a huge red barred gate with a slip of paper on it with the kanji for seal written on it. As Naruto listened, he could begin to hear what sounded like snoring, every breath bringing with it a strong gust of wind. The room was pretty warm, with a shallow surface of ankle-deep water that the pair stood on, which had heat bubbles bursting from its surface, almost like it was being boiled on a stove. Naruto was growing nervous. He knew whatever was making that noise and gusts of wind had to be big. He honestly was a little scared that he was soon about to see the fox face to face. What if it tried to attack him? Could this Hirofumi protect him from it? And that gate, is it really strong enough to hold it back? Hirofumi could practically feel how nervous Naruto was and put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry Naruto, he's not awake and he hasn't been for the past 7.5 years. I've been using my chakra to keep him asleep. He will only wake up when I let him, or when you want me to wake him," revealed Hirofumi. He could see and feel Naruto relax at knowing that the fox won't be awake. But now knowing the fox won't be waking up, Naruto took a deep breath and began walking toward to the cage with his guide following closely behind him. When Naruto was in viewing range of the fox, his jaw nearly hit the ground at the sight of it. It's anonymous. He's huge. Gigantic and so orange," exclaimed Naruto in such sheer amazement at the sight of the deeply slumbering Kyuubi that his eyes now gained sparkling stars, orange stars too. The man beside him chuckled. "You really like orange, don't you kid?" he asked, finding the blonde's amazed reactions to be greatly entertaining. Naruto turned to him and looked at him like he was insane. "Of course I do, orange is the best color in the world, maybe even the whole universe. I don't get why most people don't like it. I mean, look at him over there, he's orange, so that must mean he thinks orange is cool as well, right?" he asked argumentatively. Hirofumi arched an eyebrow at the question and looked to be actually thinking about it before coming up with nothing and just shrugged his shoulders. "Maybe, do you want to find out?" he asked, pointing to the sleeping fox. Naruto visibly tensed up at the question. Looking at the fox right now, he knew he wasn't ready to talk with it. He needed time to adjust, to get used to the knowledge that he was carrying around the 9 tails before even thinking about talking to it. Then there was also the fact that he learned he was also carrying the ghost of a dead man too. He seriously needed time to wrap his head around it all. No, not yet, I'm just not ready yet," he said, looking down at the floor as he said so, ashamed he couldn't work up the spine to do this. The ghost looked down at the boy and nodded in understanding. "It's okay Naruto, you've had a lot dropped on you today. No one can blame you for wanting to take some time to fully process all this, so don't be ashamed, but know this, I'm always here for when you need to talk, and since you now know I'm here, we can communicate freely now." Naruto was glad to hear that he could talk to Hirofumi anytime he liked now. It comforted him to know he now had someone watching over him. "Wait," he said, "he's been here since the Kyuubi was sealed inside me, does that mean?" recalled Naruto. The blonde started connecting the dots starting from the silver string, the feeling that came from it, then to Hiro's familiar voice. "Hey Hirofumi, are you the one who would cause that warm feeling that would make me feel better anytime I was feeling sad?" asked Naruto, looking straight at the man with his big blue orbs. Naruto knew he had his answer when the man smiled down at him. Naruto couldn't control himself when he learned that it really was him who was always making him feel better. He rushed Hiro, tackling him in a surprise hug that was so strong it knocked the full-grown man over and winded him in the process. After coughing and groaning a bit, the man looked down to see the young blonde still hugging him and could be seen throbbing, with sobs being heard coming from the boy. Hirofumi gently smiled down at the boy and started rubbing his head with tenderness. "Naruto, don't cry," said the whitehead. Naruto started to stop throbbing and started releasing his tight grip on the spirit's white kimono top. He lifted himself up with one hand, using the other to wipe away the tears that were coming from his now puffy blue orbs. "I'm sorry, I was just really happy to learn that I've had someone looking out for me all this time. Anytime I was feeling bad, that warm feeling would come and help me feel okay again. Anytime I was feeling lonely, it would come and make me not feel lonely. Anytime I'd get angry, it would calm me down. And now I know that was all you. You've been there for me from day one. Thank you." Naruto was silent for a moment as he stared at Hiro. I wonder if this is what it must feel like to have family?" asked the boy in a voice full of happiness and hope. Hirofumi smiled up at the boy who was leaning on his belly and laughed kindly. "Well, I guess so. I have been here a long time, so you could call me close family," he said sincerely with a sharp smile. "Really?" asked Naruto, smiling with freshly tearing up eyes, to which he gets a firm nod from the white-haired ghost. Naruto began to fully tear back up and again surprised Hirofumi by unexpectedly jumping him and putting him into a chokehold around the neck. Some may call it a hug if it was just not so ironclad. All the while the boy was crying tears of joy. Unknown to Naruto, he didn't realize that he was strangling the afterlife out of the man who was caught in his re-death grip and was now gasping for air, or whatever the dead breathe. "Nar, Naruto, please let G go. I am might be a ghost, boo, but I still need to breathe," as something chalked out a blue-faced Hirofumi. Unfortunately for Hiro, Naruto wasn't listening and just kept his grip on his neck strong. "Oh god, everything is going black. If I die here, what comes next? Do I go to super limbo, a limbo where ghosts cannot see ghosts? Could I be a ghost that could haunt other ghosts?" He wondered to himself before he blacked out. It was only after Hirofumi passed out that Naruto let his grip go, rubbing his eyes free of tears, making him not notice the full-grown man he just chalked out. "I'm so happy to have someone to call family, so what should I call you, uncle? Dad? Brother? Well?" asked Naruto, becoming confused on why he wasn't getting any response. Naruto looked down at Hirofumi, and when he did, he saw the man lying down, mouth open, eyes blank, and what seemed to be a mini ghost of him hovering out of his mouth. Naruto stared at the sight, dumbstruck. "Oh no, I killed him, oh no, I killed him," yelled out Naruto in a panic and shot up and started running around like a headless chicken, not knowing what to do. As Naruto was running around, he tried thinking up a way he could maybe revive the man he might have just killed or re-killed. "Wait, that's it," said Naruto, now smiling, thinking he might have just come up with a surefire way of saving the man. Naruto rushed over to the passed out or re-deadened man, he wasn't sure, and sat down next to him. Naruto tightly closed his eyes and started focusing really hard on what he was imagining up. Suddenly Naruto felt a new warm weight in his hands. Opening his eyes, he grinned at the glorious sight before him. It was a hot, fresh steaming bowl of miso pork ramen. "This will surely wake him up, even the dead would come back for this," said the young blonde, sounding extremely sure of himself. Naruto began waving the bowl of ramen in front of the possibly double dead man's face, resisting the urge to down the bowl of ramen himself. After a few seconds, Hirofumi began to stir, his eyelids twitching, his nostrils flaring, and he began to tiredly groan. What just happened? What's that smell?" he asked, not completely back to his senses just yet. Naruto grinned and started rubbing the back of his head while the ramen mysteriously disappeared, only leaving an empty bowl and a slightly satisfied looking Naruto behind. "Well, I sort of got a bit too excited and seemed to have hugged you a little too strongly," explained the whiskered boy, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. Hirofumi gained a tick mark on his head and shot up to his feet, one of his fists clenched. "Too strongly? You nearly killed me, Naruto," yelled out the white-haired. Naruto didn't seem fazed by the man's anger and just leaned his head to one side. "But aren't you already dead? So shouldn't it be impossible for you to die again?" he asked innocently. Hirofumi's angry expression quickly became replaced by one of realization. "Oh," he said out loud. "Yeah," he finished, looking off to the side. He looked back over to Naruto, frowning. "Well, that may be the case, but it still hurt like hell having the very afterlife choke out of you, kid, so be careful if you ever do that again, okay? And make sure not to use that kind of level of affection on something truly living," ordered Hiro, who got a nod from Naruto. Hiro started moving his head around, trying to work out any kinks in his neck and getting a few cracks here and there. "So did I miss anything while I was out like that?" he asked. Naruto perked up at that question. "Yeah, I asked since you and me are like family, what should I call you?" asked the boy happily, clearly wishing to know. Hirofumi looked down at the kid with one hand pushing on his own neck and an expression of clear thought on his face. How about grandfather or granddad, given how I'm much too old to be a brother or a father figure," he stated. Naruto smiled, liking the thought of having a real grandfather. Cool, I've always wanted a grandfather. Dadabeo. Cheered out, the young Jinchuriki fist pumping the air as he did. Hirofumi gave a sideways smile at the boy's excitement in him being his grandfather figure. He liked the sound of it himself too. He felt like he was now beginning to fulfill a role that he lost out on so long ago. Hirofumi briefly activated his Sharingan in order to permanently capture the image of Naruto's happy expression and store it to memory. He didn't want something like that to just be lost to time. It disappointed him how the Sharingan was only ever seen or used as a weapon and that no one ever seemed to discover kinder uses for it. "Hey," said Naruto loudly, knocking Hiro out of his musing grandfather, he said in a lower voice, trying to get used to calling someone that. Are you a dead ninja?" asked Naruto, who got a raised eyebrow from the man. Naruto saw it fitting to explain why he was asking that. "It's just you have the Sharingan that Sasuke was telling me about, so are you?" finished Naruto. Hirofumi's eyes started looking around as if searching for an answer until he looked back at Naruto. "You could call me that, I definitely have the skill and strength to be classed as a shinobi," he said, vaguely not wanting to define his level, especially since the boy in front of him has yet to even start any form of training into becoming a ninja. Naruto looked up at Spirit in excitement and awe. "So you are a ninja, cool. How strong are you? Are you stronger than the old man? Or, asked Naruto, setting up to bombard the poor ghost with too many questions. Whoa kid, calm down," he called out, waving his arms in front of him in a cut-it-out manner before placing a hand on top the boy's spiky-haired head who was trying to squirm out. "There's no need to interrogate me on my strength, okay? It's not like I'm coming back from the dead anytime soon to start having an epic battle with your Hokage," he said in a sarcastic joking tone to calm the hyper kid down. Naruto started sulking at this, wishing he could see that happen, thinking it would really be awesome since the old man told him he was still the strongest ninja in the village despite his current age. Naruto could see his grandfather would have to be strong if he was somehow keeping the Kyuubi asleep by himself. Naruto quickly got out of his sulking though. "Oh well, could you teach me how to be a ninja?" asked the blonde bluntly, excited by the thought of being able to do ninja stuff. "But aren't you starting the academy soon?" he asked, smirking while he did. "Well yeah, but I want to get an early start. If I want to be the best ninja ever, then I need to start as soon as possible," said Naruto, looking as serious as possible to show he was not joking. Hirofumi thought about it for a second, not seeing any reason not to. "I'll just have to be careful what I teach him," he thought to himself. "Very well, I guess I'll teach you, we can talk about a schedule later, for now don't you have a friend to go meet?" he said knowingly to the boy who looked at him confused. Naruto looked at the man confused on what he was talking about. He couldn't have been in here that long, could he? Naruto saw Hiro lifting up his hand, positioning the tip of his thumb and middle finger together and smirked down at the boy before he snapped them together and everything went black for the blonde. Naruto started freaking out and started fighting with some soft material that was on top of him until he suddenly fell off of something soft and then landed on a solid surface. Naruto started groaning as he got back up. "Ah, what the hell?" he yelled, rubbing his head and finally opening his eyes to see that it was his quilt that was on top of him and he was now back in his room, or more specifically the floor of his room. Was that all real? He asked himself, looking out his window and seeing it was now currently early light out. "Yep, sure was," answered the voice of Hiro from inside Naruto's mindscape, which surprised the boy. Naruto quickly came down from his brief surprise of hearing his grandfather's voice in his head. "Oh, so it wasn't a dream, that's a relief. It would have sucked if you weren't real," replied Naruto honestly. Hiro chuckled at the boy. "Well, I'm fully real, dead and a ghost, but nevertheless I'm here for you, Naruto. Now enough talk, I think you have an Uchiha to go meet," said the ghost, reminding the boy about his promise to go meet Sasuke at 8. Naruto's head snapped to the clock in his room and it showed 7:45. "Oh crap. I have 15 minutes. He yelled before he started rushing around. Picking up his discarded clothes from the other day, not caring if they were dirty or not, he then rushed out of his room to the bathroom to brush his teeth and wash his face before bolting down the stairs, shouting a goodbye to the matron before rocketing out the front door. On his way back to the lake where he and Sasuke met, Naruto had something he wanted to ask Hiro. "Hey Granddad, I was wondering, can I tell Sasuke about you?" he asked, wondering if he was allowed to let others know about him. "Yes you can," he said, making Naruto smile, but not yet, he added, making Naruto arch a questioning eyebrow. "You can tell him once you trust him. Tell me Naruto, do you completely trust Sasuke? And do you think he completely trusts you?" asked the ghost, sounding serious when he asked this. Naruto frowned at that question, seriously thinking it over. Him and Sasuke may just have become friends, but they don't know that much about each other yet. But still, that can change in time, maybe not now, but we'll come to trust each other. I know we will, Dadabeo. Cheered out Naruto, grinning as he said it, holding absolutely no doubt in his voice. Hirofumi smiled in Naruto's mindscape as he heard the boy. "I'm sure you both will, Naruto. Trust has to be earned, it just can't be given, and that's why it should be valued, because those willing to earn it can become those we can truly rely on most," said Hiro wisely. Naruto remained silent, deciding to just take the ghost words in and nodded in response to them before picking up his pace to the lake. It didn't take long for Naruto to arrive at the lake and saw Sasuke sitting there on the dock waiting. "Hey Sasuke," called out Naruto, waving down at the boy who waved back. Naruto started running down to meet Sasuke and his black-haired friend got up from the dock and decided to meet the blonde halfway. "For a second I thought you weren't going to show up," commended the young Uchiha. The blonde laughed awkwardly at the comment. "Sorry, I woke up late, so what do you want to do today? Play some games? Oh, how about we play hide and seek?" asked the Uzumaki, now bursting with energy and excitement on playing some more games with someone his own age for once. Board games were only so much fun for so long. "Sorry Miss Sato." Sasuke seemed to think about it for a sec. "Sure, sounds like fun," said Sasuke, sounding a little excited himself. He never really got to play many games himself when his family was alive, it was really only when his brother or mother had some free time. Dad wasn't into games unless it was dodgeball, only instead of balls he used kunai and shuriken. Naruto grinned and nodded. "Okay, let's go, I know a great place where we can play," he told Sasuke, who nodded. Naruto started leading the way to the place where the two could go play their game of hide and seek. Hirofumi was sitting back on a tree in the garden looking over at the pool, seeing Naruto and Sasuke starting to play their game of hide and seek on its crystal clear surface. He smiled faintly as he watched the two have fun, his Sharingan glowing into life. He released a happy sigh. "It's nice seeing these two getting along, I'm sure it won't be long till they come to trust each other deeply," he began, speaking to himself before his gaze focused in on Sasuke, "and when that happens we'll meet as well." Sasuke, he finished in a cooler tone that held a small noticeable undertone of anticipation. The wavy-haired man started leaning back further onto the tree, getting himself more comfortable and letting his thoughts drift. He lifted his head up, his scarlet eyes receding back into their normal brown and gold mixture. "I wonder what the future will have in store for these two. Well, whatever it is, I'm sure it'll be something," he thought to himself before deciding to get some shut-eye. A few weeks later, some weeks passed since Naruto met both Sasuke Uchiha and Hirofumi, with the latter taking up the role of the Uzumaki's grandfather. Over the weeks Naruto's friendship with Sasuke had been truly flourishing, the pair were becoming inseparable, they would hang out nearly every day and play together all the time. Recently Sasuke had started bringing Naruto to his place, which is the old Uchiha clan compound just on the outskirts of the village. The first time he'd brought him around to his clan's compound was to show him the Uchiha's great fireball jutsu. When he did, he got an earful from Naruto about how awesome it was and got a promise from the Uzumaki, saying that when he learns a cool jutsu like that he'll be the first to see it. Naruto didn't mention anything on the matter of the compound being empty or on Sasuke living by himself. He knew it would most likely bring up some terrible memories and unwanted conversations for the last Uchiha. Naruto's spirit of a grandfather had started his training shortly after their first encounter. When this came up, Naruto begged Hirofumi to teach him some cool ninjutsus, but that was quickly shot down, saying he was not going to teach a young boy any such deadly and harmful techniques like that yet. Naruto understood after his ghost Gramps explained to him that ninjutsus may look cool and flashy, but most of them can be extremely dangerous to not just him but others around him and should not just be taught to children so early on in life. Naruto pouted at that, but understood that his grandfather was just looking out for his best interest and safety. Hirofumi did say he was willing to teach the blonde Uzumaki some low-level non-harmful jutsus, for now, to give Naruto some practice and experience on using them, which got the dead man a big hug from the boy and eventually another blackout shortly halfway into the death hug. First, Hirofumi had Naruto unlock his own personal chakra reserves, which were as expected quite large for his age. After unlocking his chakra, Hiro explained some of the benefits on Naruto being a Jinchuriki. Like his enhanced healing factor, large reserves of chakra is seen, and if one day Naruto can control the Kyuubi's fully power, he could ever gain the ability to sense negative emotions. All of which Naruto was deeply excited about. Hiro skipped mentioning anything more about the power of a perfect Jinchuriki, not wanting to accidentally tempt Naruto into trying to become one before he's even physically or mentally ready, and especially since he has yet to try and form any sort of a bond with Kurama. Speaking of that, Naruto had yet to even talk with the fox, he was still feeling anxious about it, but he was getting more and more used to seeing its big furry face. Naruto even once worked up the nerve to go into the cage and stroked his claw, which funnily enough made the big bad fox crack a smile. In terms of actual training, Hiro had Naruto start on physicals like plenty exercise. Naruto would start with as many laps as he could do around the village from inside the walls, then afterwards moving on to push-ups, sit-ups, any muscle training that wouldn't risk stunting his growth or causing permanent harm on his young body. Hirofumi started Naruto on chakra control early, seeing as it would benefit him to know how to control his massive reserves as much as possible. After Naruto learned how the chakra control exercises were practiced, he went on to tell Sasuke, and they both started practicing them together, both the tree climbing and water walking. Sasuke didn't question where his friend had picked this up from, he was just excited on learning how to walk on water. Naruto has also been learning more than just the physical requirements of becoming a ninja. Hiro had been making the whiskered boy go to the library to pick up books to read. Ranging from simple text to more complex stuff so as to help the boy with his reading, writing and to maybe hopefully correct his pronunciation of a certain word. Naruto found he rather enjoyed reading especially ninja books that have stories about adventure and awesome battles. Recently he found this one book called The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi written by Jiraiya. It quickly became his favorite, its main character even has the same name as him. The main character's goal in life was to break something called the cycle of hatred. Naruto doesn't really get the full scope of the book's message, but Hirofumi says he will when he's older. He vowed he will keep on reading it until he fully grasps its meaning. So when he had enough money he bought it. At one point in time, the golden-haired lad had dragged Sasuke with him to the library. Though the Uchiha wasn't very interested at first in reading, he would have preferred to have trained or played some games, though he too came to find a book or two he found appealing to him. There's a shinobi section to the library they wanted to go into, but they weren't allowed in due to them not yet being in the academy. Currently, Naruto was around Sasuke's, and they were both practicing the water walking technique on the Uchiha's private lake. Naruto had been coming around here a lot more often lately, even having a sleepover every once in a while with the matron's permission of course. Not even he was brave enough to get on her bad side again after that time he sneaked out when he was 5. He was not allowed ramen for 5 weeks straight. He still gets chills at the thought of having to go cold turkey again like that. It was another sunny day in Fire Country, the sky was blue, there was hardly a cloud in sight, the day was warm, but not scaldingly hot. There was the occasional cool breeze that pushed through the village of Konoha, cooling those down that might be feeling the heat more than others. Naruto was currently wearing his white top with the stylized fire marking printed on it and a pair of green shorts. He was currently barefoot given his current task. The blonde's Uchiha friend was wearing a long-sleeve high-collar top with the Uchiha crest big on its back, a pair of grey shorts and was also barefoot, given he was doing the same thing as his mate. The duo both stood on the Uchiha clan's lake, their legs half sunken in the water and finding it hard to stay balanced, other than that they were both loving this. Never did they imagine that ninjas could do this, not even Sasuke had been informed that this was a shinobi art. Okay, it would seem that we're now up to our knees, Naruto commented, catching his balance while he turned to look at Sasuke. The 7-year-old Uchiha nodded, smirking at their progress. Yeah, I can't believe you knew about this, which reminds me, how did you learn about this anyway? Sasuke asked, realizing he never actually questioned his blonde friend on where he picked this up from. Naruto froze at the question and started thinking up something to tell Sasuke. I saw this team of genin practicing it and I overheard their Jonin sensei telling them how it was done, so I just copied what I saw and followed what the sensei had said, Naruto replied, hoping Sasuke would buy it. Naruto started growing nervous as Sasuke just continued to look him dead in the eye, his stare unwavering and expression unreadable. Amazing you could just eavesdrop on a Jonin like that and not be caught, commented Sasuke, sounding suspicions, making Naruto silently swallow a lump that formed in his throat. But then again, you are a pain to find in our games of hide and seek even with that neon hair of yours, said the young Uchiha, smirking at his little jab. Naruto relaxed and inwardly sighed in relief before he realized that Sasuke had just made fun of him. Hey. What dialogue? Gah. Naruto shouted, getting ready to rip his friend a new one, but due to his loss of focus on the task at hand, he quickly found himself nearly drowning in the water of the lake. Sasuke, seeing this, couldn't help but burst out laughing and in turn caused himself to also fall ungracefully into the lake. It didn't take long for the pair of 7-year-olds to get back on the water's surface, applying their chakra to their hands to climb back up onto the water's surface like it was solid ground. The two looked at each other's drenched forms and in turn snickered at the other because of how ridiculous they looked. Once they were done laughing at each other, the pair went to go dry off. Once done, they met back outside in the backyard sharing some biscuits and juice. Sasuke was eating his more politely while his friend was stuffing his hole in his mouth like they would disappear any second, and they might, just with Naruto being the magician he was putting them all away like that. Sasuke paused in eating one of his cookies, his face suddenly losing on any semblance of enjoyment. Hey, Naruto called out Sasuke, getting the current biscuit stuffed boy's attention. Why did you ask to be my friend? Asked the Uchiha, curiously. Naruto froze for a second, thinking over the question while swallowing down the crushed up biscuit in his mouth. Honestly? He asked, getting a nod. You look just like me, alone with no one to talk to, Naruto answered truthfully. Sasuke looked at Naruto and frowned. Just like you? What do you mean? Don't you have any other friends apart from me or something? He asked, finding it hard to believe. Naruto shook his head sadly. No, I don't, you're honestly my only friend who's my age. Every other kid in the village wants nothing to do with me, not even the other kids at the orphanage will talk to me, only the matron will keep me company, and that's when she has the time to spare, explained the blonde, looking down at the grass beneath the long, dull and unpolished porch of the Uchiha main house's backyard. Sasuke was deeply surprised to hear this, it didn't make any sense to him why nobody would want Naruto to be their friend, he was the greatest friend anyone could ever hope for. He was there for you when you needed him, he was willing to do anything to cheer you up if you were down, he wasn't two-faced or a backstabber, and he never expected to get anything in return for helping you, unless he said it flat out beforehand. He was honest to a fault most of the times, and hell, he treats me like I'm family, Sasuke thought to himself at the end. The ebony-haired orphan began reflecting back on all the times him and Naruto had been hanging out around the village, it was now that he was remembering the ways other people looked at them. There were two very different looks being sent, one was sympathy and the other disgust, and not all the looks were aimed at him, that much was becoming all too clear now. But that doesn't matter anymore, you're my friend Sasuke, plain and simple. I don't care if I only have one or a million friends, all that matters to me is that any friend I have is a true friend, someone I can rely on and count on when I need it, someone who will never turn their back on me, and someone who looks at me for me, Naruto stated, the last part barely a whisper, while his hand subtly reached for the area of his stomach where the seal keeping the 9 tails inside was located. Sasuke was confused by the last bit, but thought it didn't matter. Well, Naruto, I want you to know I'll always be your friend no matter what, we're best friends, nothing is gonna change that, said Sasuke with serious conviction like he was swearing an oath of some sort. Naruto smiled at his friend, deeply happy at his friend's promise to him. Thanks Sasuke, and I swear to you the same thing, times infinity. Promised the blonde, turning childish quickly at the end. Sasuke smirked at his friend, glad to see his usual mood back, before taking on a more sad look. Naruto, there's something I want to tell you, the Uchiha proclaimed, sounding nervous like what he wanted to say was intensely sorrowful for him. Naruto looked at Sasuke confused as to why he seemed so very gloomy now. Yeah, what is it Sasuke? You can tell me, I promise I won't tell anyone if you don't want me to, the golden-haired child stated honestly, if it was a secret he wouldn't say a word about it to anyone and would take it to the grave. Tell me, do you know how my clan was killed? Asked the Uchiha, to which his friend shook his head and no. My big brother Itachi did it, alone, in a single night, said Sasuke with a mixture of emotions in voice when mentioning him, sounding angry, hateful, hurt, betrayed and all other sorts of things that just couldn't be simply named. Naruto's eyes became as wide as could be at hearing this. Yo, your brother did it? On his own? In a single night? I can't believe it. Why? Why would he do something like that? To his own clan? His own family? Naruto asked frantically. He couldn't for the life of him understand why someone would do that to the people who raised him, loved and cared for him, it sounded crazy, insane and downright evil. Sasuke looked down, his hands gripping tightly on his knees, he said he did it to test his power, he spat out like it was a bad taste in his mouth. He said he did it all just to see how strong he had become and nothing more. Sasuke finished, his voice carrying such hurt and anger in it that you could feel it, like a cold dagger running its edge slowly across your soul. Hirofumi, who was hearing this through Naruto, felt sorrow for the young boy. He had seen the length in which the Uchiha had gone to over the decades to obtain power, killing their loved ones, stealing each other's eyes to retain that power and keep their light, but in the end, only adding further darkness to themselves. But this was a new level entirely, and for nothing more than to test one's own strength was just plain insane. Being within Naruto meant Hiro couldn't just float around everywhere like he used to, so he'd been out of the loop on the world's latest news. So he just thought that those times of Uchiha slaughtering Uchiha to attain greater power were gone. Sadly, it seems he was gravely mistaken, it seems it was all merely just on pause. Naruto couldn't believe this, that Sasuke's very own brother did this to him and said he did it all for such a reason as testing his own strength. Why would anyone kill their own clan just to test how strong they were? It makes no sense, it's such a small reason that has brought nothing but colossal amounts of pain. In the end, he decided to keep me alive so that I would come to hate him and grow stronger, with the goal that one day I would seek him out and try to kill him, and that hopefully before we meet again, I would have gained the same eyes as him. So he said to me, but I won't do what he tells me, I will make him pay for what he did, but I won't follow what he says I have to do in order to get those same eyes, Sasuke stated, promising himself. Naruto was confused on what Sasuke's brother must have told him. What did he say you had to do to get these eyes he was talking about? The blonde asked, worry in his voice on what the answer could possibly be that was making Sasuke act so determined not to try and get them if they were so great. Sasuke leaned forwards, his black hair covering his eyes from view. He said I would have to kill my best friend in order to awaken those eyes, same as he did, Sasuke revealed, sounding and looking discouraged, especially at the memory of learning how Shisui really died. Naruto was utterly shocked at hearing this, he could never image himself killing anyone, but he especially could never image himself killing Sasuke. To possess a power that couldn't be reached without doing so must be a horrible curse and a burden in of itself. Sasuke looked at Naruto, not realizing that his eyes had changed from black to crimson, with each eye possessing one Tama marking on the iris. If getting to the next level of the Sharingan means killing you, then to hell with it. I'll find the strength to beat Itachi another way. Exclaimed Sasuke with every fiber of his being, showing as much resolve as possible. Though Sasuke started growing confused when Naruto's mouth started stretching into a knowing smirk. What? I mean it. Sasuke reinforced, beginning to sound irritated, frowning, feeling like he was being made fun of by the look on Naruto's face. Naruto shook his head. No, it's not that, Sasuke, I completely believe you and I promise I'll help you get there in any way I can, Naruto said, defusing the tension. It's just, well, you seem to have already gotten started, finished Naruto, hinting at what he meant by pointing to his own eyes while grinning up a storm. Sasuke seemed to get the hint and shot up to his feet and ran into his house to look for the nearest mirror to confirm his hopes. After a few seconds, Naruto heard a hell yeah come from inside the house before Sasuke exited back out into the yard with a full-on grin on his face, something Naruto had never before seen on his friend's face. Hiro was watching the scene, and when he saw Sasuke's happily grinning face, he quickly activated his own Sharingan to take a mental photo of it so that it could never be forgotten. One very rarely ever sees an Uchiha childishly grin, it's a sight just as likely to be seen as snow falling in the desert, he internally monologued while donning a one-sided smirk. Hirofumi saw a light orb floating into his path and lazily poked it with one of his fingers and watched with enjoyment as it burst into a million wonderful colors before then being carried off by a light breeze. I can't believe I've awakened my Sharingan, Sasuke commented, still amazed that he had just awakened his clan's famed Kekkei Genkai. I thought I would have to go through the near-death experience that's always mentioned, maybe what I was just talking about right now gave me the push I needed, pondered the young Uchiha, rubbing his chin and thought. Who cares? Point is now you've awoken your eyes and are one step closer to becoming stronger than Itachi, was it? Itachi, corrected Sasuke, deadpanning, but inwardly was storing that name away for later use. Right, Itachi, so right now you're a step closer, though your eyes look kinda different from the ones I've seen before, pointed out the Uzumaki, cocking a blonde eyebrow as he observed his friend's newly awakened Sharingan. Sasuke looked at his whiskered guest a bit confused on what he meant until it clicked. Oh, I see, well, the Sharingan has to develop first, here you see these markings in my eyes. He asked, pointing to the markings on his iris, to which he got a nod. You see, they're called Tamo, and when my Sharingan is fully matured, they'll have 3 in each eye, and when that happens, I'll be able to access all the Sharingan's abilities fully, explained Sasuke, sounding very proud of his clan's Taijutsu. Cool, said Naruto simply, while picking up and eating another biscuit and taking a swig of his juice. Sasuke smirked and nodded smugly. Yeah, it is, he pridefully replied. Now how do I turn these off? I'm beginning to feel a bit tired, Sasuke wondered aloud to himself, aware that he didn't know exactly how to deactivate them. Naruto, suggest to him to try and focus on cutting the chakra flow to his eyes, advised Hiro. Naruto inwardly nodded to his grandfather. Hey Sasuke, try cutting the chakra flow to your eyes, suggested Naruto, following through on Hirofumi's request. Sasuke simply nodded, not even bothering with trying to correct Naruto's pronunciation of chakra again after the last 100th time he tried and failed. Sasuke closed his eyes, focusing on cutting the flow of his chakra to his eyes. After a minute of focusing, Sasuke felt a relief in his eyes and opened them, noticing everything around him no longer being as sharp or as clear as before. Sasuke breathed a sigh of relief. It worked, he muttered to himself, feeling much relief now that his chakra wasn't being depleted so rapidly by his infant Taijutsu. Sasuke then sat back down next to the blonde, who was now wearing a suddenly serious look on his face. You must really trust me to tell me all that, huh, Sasuke, Naruto commented, sounding a mix of serious and disappointed. Sasuke looked over to Naruto and nodded, confused on his friend's sudden shift in mood. Yeah, I do, ever since we became friends I've felt my mind becoming more and more clear and my desire for isolation begin to fade, and I have you to thank for it all, Naruto replied Sasuke, trailing off as he spoke. Naruto looked down smiling. I guess it's now or never, Sasuke. I have something I want to tell you. I've wanted to tell you for a while now, but I just didn't know how to or when to bring it up. It's the reason why everyone hates me and why no one our age wants anything to do with me, started Naruto, seeing that he clearly now had Sasuke's complete attention. Naruto took in a deep breath, feeling his nerves begin to rise and hoping Sasuke won't turn on him. Sasuke, do you know of the Nine Tails attack? Asked Naruto, his voice turning surprisingly serious given his often sunny personality. Sasuke nodded, curious about his friend's sudden personality shift, not yet seeing why that attack has any relation to Naruto's situation. Yeah, I know of it, I know it was killed by the 4th, replied the new Sharingan user. Naruto nodded, agreeing somewhat with his friend's reply. Did you know it's impossible to kill the Kyuubi? Asked Naruto, getting a shocked and disbelieving look from his friend. It's true, I'm not kidding, it turns out the Kyuubi is made up of solid Katra, and because of that it's completely immortal. It's been around way before Konoha was even here, lectured Naruto, stating the facts taught to him by Hiro. Sasuke was staring in wide-eyed awe at this new information, hearing in Naruto's voice that he was certain about everything he was saying. No way, the Nine Tails is really that old? Asked the young Uchiha, getting a nod. But then something struck the young ebony-haired boy. But wait, if that's the case, then how did the fourth beat it if it's immortal? At that question Sasuke saw Naruto's face darken, making Sasuke grow worried on why or how his constantly vigorous friend could ever possess such a look. Naruto. He whispered. Naruto turned away from Sasuke, suddenly finding the floor to be much more interesting. He wasn't ashamed of being a Jinchuriki. Naruto was just afraid of the constant loneliness the title had brought him in the past. You can't kill Katra, but you can seal it away, he started solemnly. Best place to seal away that much is into something living, explained further. At this point for Sasuke it was all beginning to rapidly put itself together, the stares his friend got, the whispers he would hear when he was with him, how he was acting right this very moment. But the Uchiha decided to remain quiet and let him speak. Naruto kept staring at the ground as he continued. A person is the best living thing to seal that much Katra into, but not just any person will do. If chosen wrong their Katra coils would get fried and they could die. So a newly summoned baby is needed because their coils can adapt to the sudden change in their Katra system. Naruto paused and turned to look back at what he hopes is still his friend. And so I was picked, and the Nine Tails was sealed inside me, finished Naruto, hopping with every ounce of his being that Sasuke wouldn't start to hate him like everyone else does. Sasuke didn't say a word straight away, just deciding to let the revelation about his friend sink in. So that's how the Nine Tails was really stopped all those years ago, and you carry it around. The way I see it, it's like a kunai and a scroll. You're the scroll and the kunai's the fox. You're still Naruto, but even if the fox is sealed inside you that doesn't change you into the fox, now does it? Sasuke reasoned, not seeing Naruto any differently than he did a second ago. Sasuke could clearly see Naruto was not the Nine Tails. He's the nicest and most kindest person he has ever met in his life. He acted a little idiotic at times with his pranks and all that, but that only proved further that Naruto and the Kyuubi were completely separate beings, even if the latter is sealed away into the former. Naruto looked at Sasuke, completely astonished at how well he saw Naruto's situation and how understanding he was. Adults really are stupid, he briefly thought. Thanks Sasuke, you have no idea how much of a relief it is to know that you don't see me as the Kyuubi or are scared of me because I hold him, he said, relief and joy thick in his voice as he spoke. Sasuke waved him off. Don't worry about it, he said nonchalantly. So are there any benefits to being turned into a human scroll? He asked, joking a bit to try and lighten the atmosphere. Naruto laughed slightly. Well, being the big fuzzballs Jinchuriki, that's what I'm called by the way. I get increased healing, huge Katra reserves, and if I'm one day capable of controlling his Katra completely, I'll be able to sense negative emotions, explained Naruto, giving a toothy grin as he did. Speaking proudly about his own unique abilities and future ones to come. Sasuke whistled, impressed by Naruto's powers with being the Kyuubi's host. All that sounds pretty cool, but this ability to sense negative emotions, now that sounds like something special. I was told of sensor types by my bro well, Itachi. He told me they can feel the chakra of people more keenly than most, but he never said they possessed the power to sense emotions though, said Sasuke, hesitating at the mention of his brother. Yeah, I know about that, said Naruto simply, seeing it best to not point out Sasuke's trouble at mentioning his brother, and also beginning to see how much Itachi must have been a part of his past life once upon a time. It's a unique thing I'll get from being the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. I just have to one day be able to control his chakra, but I'll be able to do it one day, just you watch, Databeo. He exclaimed, determined to fulfill this goal at becoming a perfect Jinchuriki. The young Uchiha smirked over to Naruto. Well, if there's any way I can help in this, just let me know, I'll do whatever I can, promised Sasuke genuinely. The blonde smiled over to his friend, glad here has his support for when he needs it. Naruto still had one last thing he wanted to tell Sasuke about now, that felt he could trust him enough to tell him. Sasuke, there's still one more thing I feel I need to tell you, said Naruto, grinning sheepishly. He felt this one was gonna be the real strange part. The Uchiha raised a curious eyebrow at this. Yeah, what it is? You got something else living inside you now too, he joked, smirking, but lost it when he saw Naruto looking everywhere but at him. You serious? Naruto nodded while laughing and scratching the back of his head nervously. What? Is this one the spirit of a dead ninja or something, he joked again, not thinking it could be something like that. Naruto looked at Sasuke amazed. Wow, you're really good at guessing, aren't you? He laughed out while scratching one of his whiskered cheeks. Sasuke stared at Naruto, dumbstruck. Really? Naruto nodded. That's hard to believe, more so than a giant massive Katra. Katra, corrected Naruto. Chakra, cough. Damn, now he's got me saying it. Fox-shaped chakra being stuffed inside you, stated Sasuke, disbelieving. It sounded plain crazy. It was one thing for something made of chakra to be sealed within someone, but this was the kind of stuff you heard in spooky ghost stories told to you around a campfire. Naruto was trying to think up a way in which he could prove to Sasuke that what he was saying was completely true. Naruto, connect your chakra with Sasuke's by fist bumping, instructed Hiro from within Naruto's mindscape. Naruto's face took a bewildered expression. Fist bumping? Seriously? He questioned, not sounding very amazed. For something like linking chakras he would have expected something a little more amazing, spiritual or complex. Listen kid, I don't make the rules, okay, so just do it, Hiro ordered, not looking to be questioned on his methods. Naruto just shrugged and put up his fist to Sasuke, who looked at it confused on what it was supposed to mean. If you don't believe me, then why don't you come and meet him for yourself, unless you're scared of ghosts or something, teased Naruto challengingly. Sasuke scowled half-heartedly before smirking. Humph. Me? Scared? Yeah right, so what do I do, just bump fists with you? Asked the Uchiha, getting a chip nod. Shrugging and not questioning his friend's method of doing this linking stuff, and just lifted up his own fist and connected it with the blonde Uzumaki's. The first thing Sasuke felt was a tugging on his senses, and the next thing he noticed is that his surroundings had changed dramatically before he even realized it. The Uchiha looked over to Naruto, who was now standing up with his arms parted in a welcoming gesture. Welcome to my mindscape, imagine it like the ultimate home away from home, explained Naruto. Currently, the duo was on the garden level, not in the depths where the Kyuubi was dwelling, more accurately they were near the bottomless pool that leads to Kurama's den. Sasuke looked around, amazed by how the place looked, the lush grass, the mature trees that dotted the place, the soft black sky, the crystal clear water, the floating orbs of light, gave it all an almost mystical appearance, like something out of a fairy tale. Wow was all Sasuke could muster as a response to the view of it all. I'm glad to see my sense of style is once again appreciated, spoke Hirofumi, appearing out of nowhere behind the pair, startling Sasuke most of all, who activated his Sharingan on reflex. Hiro smirked down at the young raven head. Possessing the Sharingan for only a few minutes and already learning to activate in on the fly, impressive, complimented the white-haired man. Sasuke looked the man up and down, sizing him up, using his eyes as best as he could right now to study him. Sasuke frowned when he discovered he couldn't for the life of him get any read on the man's strength, not that he really knew what he was reading. So are you this ghost that lives inside Naruto then? He asked, curious about the man's intentions with his friend. Hiro smirked down at the Uchiha and nodded. Why yes I am, and it's a pleasure to finally meet you Sasuke. I am the deceased, but still very much handsome Hirofumi, he said, while stretching out a friendly hand to the Uchiha, who looked at it for a minute before deciding to take it. The ghost smiled happily when the boy responded to his offer at a handshake. Well, good to see you're not against pleasantries, commented the deceased man. Sasuke nodded, still trying to wrap his head around the fact he was currently shaking hands with a literal dead guy, well inside of what he could only guess as Naruto's head, who also possessed the Kyuubi somewhere. Yeah I guess, but this is all really hard to take in, a ghost, I didn't know they actually even existed, and now I know my friend has one living inside him alongside a living natural disaster, explained Sasuke, amazed and still sounding a little disbelieving. Hirofumi and Naruto both snickered a little at this. Well, take as long as you need to process all this, it's not every day you meet a ghost while going into your friend's soul to do so, commented Hiro in a joking manner, trying to lighten it all a bit for the boy. So for the next few minutes, Sasuke just sat down trying to process everything. Naruto was lying on the grass watching as all the orbs of light just floated about like feathers in the wind, occasional popping the odd one that came into his reach, bursting into an uncountable amount of colors. Hiro, on the other hand, was leaning back on his tree near the pond, waiting for the Uchiha to exit his thoughts. Sasuke let out a tired sigh, he seemed to have finally come to terms with everything, well, most of everything. He turned to look over at the resting form of Hiro, who had his eyes closed and appeared to be sleeping, but Sasuke could tell he wasn't. So tell me Hirofumi, what are you doing here inside Naruto? Shouldn't you be in the afterlife or wherever the spirits of the dead go? Asked the Uchiha, suspicion clear in his eyes and tone. Hiro cracked open a single brown yellowish eye to look at the black-haired boy. You would think, wouldn't you, but no I'm not, I didn't feel like going really, I decided to stay behind and check things out, as of why I'm here inside Naruto. I thought the boy could do with my help and guidance, same with you if you wanted. Hiro explained while slipping in his offer to the young Uchiha. Sasuke folded his arms and frowned, seeing he wasn't going to get a more detailed answer than that. And how could you help me, huh? He asked curiously on what this man could offer him. He wasn't particularly fussy about how he was gonna gain the strength to kill Itachi or who even gives it to him. Still, he needed to hear some details on what he might be getting himself into if he accepts. Hiro smirked at that question. I know quite a lot, where do you really think Naruto picked up those little chakra control exercises? Or the knowledge he currently has on chakra in general? Or how he knows about the fox's anatomy and its status as an immortal? And the benefits that come with simply being its host? Hirofumi remarked, stating his points in order of growing relevance. Sasuke stared at the man, now getting it, so it was you, you're the reason Naruto knows so much about ninja subjects, stated Sasuke, who got a nod. He knew Naruto was very talented at sneaking around when given certain circumstance like hide and seek and his ever-growing prowess in pranks, but to sneak upon and eavesdrop on a Jonin and not get caught seemed too far-fetched. Yeah, I'm partial to thank for that, but Naruto is very smart when he wants to be, stated Hiro, looking over to Naruto, who wasn't really paying any attention to the pair and was instead just watching the lights with a relaxed expression on his whiskered face. Sasuke looked over to his friend and also saw the same thing and decided to not bother him and instead turned back to the ghost. So you said you can help me too, right? The Uchiha asked, wondering what this dead man could possibly teach him. Hiro nodded. Yeah, I'm teaching Naruto how to be a ninja and he honestly wants you to join him. I can teach you a lot, that's promised, but I have ground rules, boy, he said, turning deadly serious at the end with an air around him which made Sasuke's skin prickle. Firstly, if I do teach you, you will do as I say, and if I do tell you not to do something, you won't do it. Also, I won't be teaching you any high-level jutsus yet, he said, noticing Sasuke take on a look of disappointment. Too much power too early on can easily corrupt, also it would be just plain foolish and irresponsible of me to just go and teach such deadly tricks to children who don't even know how to walk water yet, said Hiro, sounding very stringent with each of his rules. But I know how to do the great fireball jutsu, argued Sasuke in a protesting way while weaving through the hand seals to demonstrate his ease with the molding of the technique. Hiro nodded in agreement with him. Yes, you can, and I personally think it's a moronic tradition of the Uchiha clan to teach a child such a dangerous technique so early on. It could very easily go south, but I trust you'll be careful in its use. Sasuke lambasted the spirit smoothly and calmly from his place under the tree. Sasuke clearly sensed that there would be no changing the man's mind on the subject of jutsus. Sasuke felt great frustration that the spirit wouldn't be teaching him any new jutsus, but he then smirked subtly when he realized something. He could just use his newly awakened Sharingan and just copy some jutsus from practicing shinobi. Hirofumi's single open eye narrowed. He knew exactly what the boy was thinking. He wasn't blind, very far from it in fact. The ghost obviously knew the Sharingan possessed the ability to copy next to any technique. After all, he has the Dojutsu himself. Oh ho ho, come now Sasuke, do you think I'm stupid? Hiro asked, wry amusement filling his voice while he smirked over at the boy. Sasuke tensed and looked off to the side, refusing to look the ghost in the eye. I don't what you mean, he said, pulling his best poker face. The ghost man snickered knowingly. Oh please don't give me that, I know you were just thinking about using your Sharingan in order to copy jutsus, but if you want to learn from me, I forbid you doing such a thing until I say so, Hiro warned, calmly laying down another ground rule. Sasuke looked at him, frowning furiously. You can't do that. It's one of the parts of my Kekkei Genkai. And to top it all off, I don't have anyone to actually teach me how to use these eyes, so I need to teach myself now, argued Sasuke. He sounded both sad and angry at the mention of there being no one to help him understand his Dojutsu anymore, since everyone who could was now dead. Hirofumi smiled over to the boy. Well, you're right, but also wrong, he said, making Sasuke turn back to him. The young Uchiha looked at the man confused. What do you mean? He asked. Hirofumi closed his brown and yellowish eye, and when he next opened them, both his eyes were now showing his fully matured Sharingan, the Tomo spinning slowly. Sasuke sat there frozen in glass-shattering shock, unable to fathom what he was currently seeing. How does he possess the Sharingan? Is he a dead Uchiha maybe? But he doesn't look like one I've ever seen. I've never met an Uchiha who possessed brown eyes before. Different hair colors wasn't really uncommon, but I've never seen a member with different colored eyes. So as you can see, I can personally help you with your Sharingan prowess, Hiro spoke up, kicking Sasuke right out of his thoughts. Sasuke came back to his senses after hearing Hiro's statement on teaching him how to use his Sharingan. Really? You can? He asked and got a nod. Sasuke was gleeful to hear he would now have someone to teach him how to use his Dojutsu, but there was still a question on his mind. Hirofumi, are you an Uchiha? He asked, wondering. Hiro looked to have to think about that question for a second. Well, you could say I'm related to the Uchiha, but I don't really feel like going into detail about that. It would be boringly long for you kids, he said, flipping the question off like it mattered about as much as a question on whether it would be windy tomorrow. Sasuke and Naruto, who started listening in, were curious but decided not to pry. They felt if he really wanted to tell them he would eventually, but for now they decided to focus on what he had planned for them. Naruto sat back up and looked over to Hiro. Hey Gramps, so what are we gonna do now that Sasuke knows about you? How are you and him gonna stay in contact? Hiro smirked over to them and put his palms together, which began to glow with white light pouring out from between them. He parted his hands, and there was a bit of a glare that died down to show, floating between his palms, a small black Uzumaki swirl orbited by 3 smaller black Magatama beads, all encompassed by a burning silver aura that shined. Naruto and Sasuke got closer in order to get a better look at the objects floating in the dancing energy, moving under the tree and now only sitting a foot away from Hiro's open hands. The silver light casting over them all with the intensity to rival a campfire. But this Hiro stated, smiling at the odd looks on the children's faces. Currently, we find our favorite blonde Uzumaki and raven-haired Uchiha standing before the gates of the Konoha Ninja Academy. Today was going to be their first day at school. They were both feeling a bit nervous. Sasuke was hiding his nerves much better than his blonde friend, who was managing to hide his behind an excited and energetic demeanor. Sasuke let his hand move to a certain spot on the left side of his chest, the very spot where Hirofumi had placed a seal, which allows him to have a link with Sasuke, much like he does with Naruto. It also granted Sasuke free access to the garden space, just like his whiskered friend. Another special trait of this seal is that it's invisible and furthermore undetectable, but the seal can become visible to the naked eye if Sasuke wills it. The seal appearance comes in the form of an yuzu swirl, surrounded by 3 evenly spaced out Magatama, laid out in a way that almost resembles a fully matured Sharingan. Naruto had commented on that, saying it looked like a dizzy Sharingan. The pair's training under Hiro has been going well. He kept to his word and did teach them some jutsus, but he kept them very low level, easy to handle and non-deadly, right for children in his opinion. Before deciding to teach them he had first decided to find out their affinities. Some months ago. I don't think you need to read mine, I'm an Uchiha, it's obvious mine's going to be fire, Sasuke stated pridefully, arms folded, looking up at Hiro, who was sitting in front of both him and Naruto on the top step of the dojo, while the boys sat on the grass below. I know, Sasuke, that you are bound to have a well-developing nature for fire, but you could also possess more than that one affinity, explained the white-haired man, holding up a single finger in a gesture for his explanation. Sasuke's eyes widened slightly at the exciting possibility that he could have another nature type. You really think so? He asked, hopeful that it might be true. If he had more than one natural affinity, it would give him a wider range of jutsus he could master in the future, bettering his chances of killing Itachi. Hiro nodded. Naruto's mind was running through the list of elements and which one he could possibly possess. He was really hoping for earth, he could use that for so many pranks that involved messy results. He began to snicker at the thought of someone walking and falling into a hole filled with itching powder and chicken feathers, with glue naturally included into the mix, the end result being a man-sized chicken running around and acting well like a headless chicken. Hirofumi and Sasuke decided to ignore Naruto's snickering, not wanting to know what he could possibly have planned this time. Okay, so how do we learn what elements we possess? Gramps asked Sasuke with a tone that carried subtle eagerness. The Uchiha also took to calling the man grandfather after some time and much inner debate. The spirit had started being there for him in ways that he needed. He felt that the ghost understood him, understood what he wanted and needed, and wasn't judging him for it. He didn't feel like he needed to keep his cards close to his chest around him, much in the same way he feels around Naruto. He can let his guard down. Plus Hiro had the Sharingan, that alone told Sasuke that they were related, though that may be from some distant time, possibly going back as far as the warring clans. It felt kinda cool being able to talk to an ancient Uchiha like this. Sasuke's question knocked Naruto out of his thoughts of tricks and mischief and was now also wondering how they would learn their nature types. Yeah, old man. How do we learn what elements we have? Hirofumi smirked and stretched out his hands to the pair. Touch my hand, swear, and I'll read your chakra and see what nature it possesses, he instructed calmly. Naruto and Sasuke turned to each other before shrugging. They have come to understand that Hiro was just capable of stuff that they themselves have yet to even begin to comprehend. When he did try to explain to them, they would be left dumbfounded for hours before eventually deciding to just forget about it. First was Naruto, who placed his right hand on Hiro's right. Naruto began feeling the warm tickling sensation as his chakra was being pulled to the surface. His hand started emitting the blue shimmering glow of his chakra. A strong affinity for wind, Hiro stated, making Naruto grin, knowing that wind was apparently a pretty rare affinity in the world as a whole and was already making him feel more like a badass. And heard the blonde, making his ears twitch to attention, a slightly lesser affinity for water, finished Hiro, sounding quite impressed. Naruto couldn't believe it, he possessed 2 nature types. It's no earth, but I can already imagine some amazing pranks I could pull off with these 2, he thought, gaining a foxy grin with a mischievous glint in his ocean blue eyes. Hiro gestured to Sasuke to do the same, stepping forward and placing his left hand in the spirit's own left, with the same sensation of chakra coming to the surface of the raven head skin. Okay, as expected, a good affinity for fire, began Hiro. Sasuke frowned at the good part, wondering why it was only mentioned as being good and not strong like Naruto's wind nature. But it's not your strongest affinity if that's what you're frowning at, Sasuke commented Hirofumi, knocking Sasuke out of his inner musing. It isn't? He asked and got a confirming nod. Sasuke's frown only deepened, feeling a blow to his pride at learning that his main and strongest affinity was not in fact fire like most Uchihas were. Then what is? He sternly asked, hoping it was something useful at least. Your stronger affinity Sasuke is in fact lightning, the dead man revealed. The young Uchiha's ebony eyes widened greatly at hearing this new revelation about his nature types, but that expression quickly shifted to a gleeful smirk. Lightning. This is great. The powerful jutsus I could learn and create from this element are sure to kill Itachi, it's perfect. Fire for mid-range combat and lightning for close quarters and more. The Raven head mentally cheered, excited at the new possibilities and how his chances for getting revenge on his brother had just gone up a significant notch. Hirofumi could sense this red thirst within Sasuke, but decided to let it go for now. There was still plenty of time for the Uchiha's hunger for revenge to lessen. All that mattered was keeping the boy away from falling down a dark path, like most who seek revenge do. Hiro let these thoughts go and refocused himself on the task at hand. The spirit clapped his hands together and gave the pair a big toothy smile. "Okay kids, I have just the jutsus in mind to teach you for these elements," he stated, making the young shinobi hopefuls very excited, if the stars in their eyes were any hint. After that day, Hiro taught the pair some low-level ninjutsus, one wind and water type for Naruto, and one new fire type for Sasuke, and a lightning type too. The Uchiha had asked why he had to learn a new and much weaker fire type, given he already had the great fireball jutsu, and Hiro's answer to that was, "What? You plan on starting campfires with that or something?" The boy had felt deeply embarrassed after that, given the name of the jutsu was fire style. Lighter should have been enough to give away the jutsu's purpose. Hiro had them start on some chakra control exercise that would help them strengthen their nature types, making it easier for them to convert their chakra to their desired nature and allow them to mold it from there. Naruto was having a much easier time with his water affinity than his wind one, while Sasuke was having similar trouble with his lightning. The Uchiha was much more familiar with his fire as opposed to his newly discovered element. Despite their troubles with their stronger elements, the pair were able to perform the techniques taught to them by their grandfather figure. He told them that they would be easy to learn and do, because they do not require the user needing full mastery over their affinities, like training wheels, but for ninjutsu. At some point during the 5 months, Naruto and Sasuke decided to be each other's sparring partners. Sasuke had been going easy on Naruto at the beginning, since his blonde friend didn't possess any actual style or previous training like he did. As time passed, Naruto started quickly catching up and even began developing a style. After some help from both his grandfather and Sasuke, each giving him tips and correcting some large faults in his form, he was quickly on his way to forming a taijutsu that was fitting to him. During those months, Sasuke's Sharingan had swiftly matured thanks to the guidance of Hirofumi and was now sporting full sets of Tamo in each eye. Sasuke's training on using his Sharingan has been going amazingly well so far. Currently, Hirofumi has been focusing on developing Sasuke's Eye of Insight, helping him sharpen and see things clearly, how to apply it in combat, reading the chakra of others and so forth. Sasuke was amazed by how much his vision changes when his ocular power is active, seeing chakra in such an array of colors, how slowed down everything seems to become, the ease in which he could copy and mimic the movements of others perfectly, it was all so amazing to him. Though he was still not yet allowed to copy jutsus, not even the low-level ones Hiro gave to him, the spirit strictly told him to learn them without the Sharingan's help. Hirofumi didn't want the young boy to become overly reliant on the Sharingan's ability to copy, because he felt if he did it would prevent Sasuke from ever developing and creating something original and dull any imaginative thinking the boy possesses. Furthermore, he feared Sasuke could even lose his desires to work for his strength if he starts seeing his taijutsu as an easy ticket to the top, like other Uchihas had done so in the past and later on became their downfall. Some months ago, Naruto finally gained the courage needed to speak with the Kyuubi, which he learned actually had a name and furthermore 8 siblings. Quite the big family, huh? Naruto had asked his gramps what the fox's name was, but the spirit replied, saying he would not say because Ibiju's name is deeply special to them, and to learn it directly from one's own mouth would be like a show of trust. Naruto learned that the Nine Tails harbored's great distrust for humanity, along with even greater disdain, but all for understandable reasons. Hiro had explained to the young Jinchuriki that all the tailed beasts were created by a very powerful but even more so peaceful man. He explained that at some point in time, humanity stopped seeing the tailed beasts as intelligent beings and started to see them as mindless monsters, demons that were feared and hated for no real reason than their beastly looks and humongous eyes. It didn't help that the history of their origins were slowly being lost to time. After hearing that, Naruto felt great shame for humanity and their cruelty towards the tailed beasts and vowed to show the Kyuubi that he was not the same as them and promised that he would one day learn the Kyuubi's and all his siblings' individual names. "Okay, I think I'm ready," said young Naruto, feeling more anxious than he could express. He and his gramps were standing outside the cage, but also safely out of clawing range, as suggested by the white-haired ghost. Hiro nodded but still felt the need to ask, "Are you sure, Naruto, if you don't want to weaken?" He stopped when he saw Naruto giving him a look that said, "I'm ready," so seeing this, ghost knew he didn't have to worry for him. The man nodded before bringing his right hand up to his chest, then folding his fingers into the ram seal release. He called out. Then without any warning, strong bursts of wind started blowing through the whole of the room, wisps and strings of silver chakra could be seen flowing on the wind's currents, with Hiro at the center of all this intense weather, his body emitting a silver glow. Naruto shielded his eyes from the intense gales, but did try peering out to get a look at what his grandfather was doing. He also felt if he didn't already have chakra applied to his feet, he would have possibly been either knocked over or worse yet blasted away. The blonde's attention was taken away from Hiro's brief display of chakra power by the gruff sound of something between groaning and growling, followed shortly after by tremors that made Naruto feel like he was about to be shaken out of his skin. Naruto turned, seeing it was the Kyuubi waking up that was causing all this disturbance. Oogwag, where am I? Last thing I remember was being split in two and getting sealed away into some bobby weight. Sealed. Roared the confused Kyuubi, now coming back to his senses and taking in his surroundings, with the first thing being noticed was the red metal bars right before him. The giant fox growled angrily, his jaw clenched and his hazy gaze snapping into a frightening scowl. Umatherfu, the rest of its following cursing, were blocked off to Naruto by Hiro, swiftly appearing behind him and covering his ears, and protecting his innocent mind in the process. The next few minutes were spent watching and hearing in Hirafumi's case, as the fox just did nothing but swear, curse and violently smash against the cage door in an attempt to break free, but to no successes. After seeing no results, the Nine Tails just decided to settle for cursing the names of all those that got him here, first starting with Madara and working his way up to Minato and Kushina. After a few more minutes, which were spent with Kurama describing, in vivid detail, how he would rip each of the individuals mentioned apart, to which Hirofumi had to swallow down his own spiritual puke 3 times before the enraged fox was finally done and only now seemed to notice them. Hiro looked up at the fox, clearly irradiated with the giant's vile and vulgar tongue. Are you done now? We have a 7-year-old here who I would prefer doesn't hear any of that colorful language of yours. Bit out the spirit, his tone threatening. It didn't help his mood that he still had a bad aftertaste in his mouth. Kyuubi looked on confused and was even a little frightened by the man. He didn't know why, but the man's tone and stare made the fur on the back of his neck stand, but his pride was not willing to let him show that he was in any way intimidated. And should I care? He asked, arrogantly, with a smug grin while trying to intimidate Hiro by showing the man all his purely white and razor-sharp teeth. Hirofumi's brown and yellowish eyes narrowed, now boring their way into the Kyuubi's own scarlet-slitted ones and quickly whipping the grin from Kurama's face and making him tense. The look in the man's eyes was sending a clear message that the fox couldn't refuse. Do we have an understanding? He asked, getting a reluctant nod from the chakra being. Hiro donned a kind, but still quite an edgy smile. Good. Now, as you can probably tell, this is your new seal, he stated, making the fox groan in irritation at being reminded. And this little guy here, he said, nodding down towards Naruto, while removing his hand steadily from the boy's ears, is your new host. The stage is yours, Naruto, he finished, before instantly vanishing from view in the blink of an eye and leaving both Naruto and Kurama wondering how he just did that. The fox looked down at Naruto, being the first to come out of his stupor, and laughed snidely at the boy. Really, you're my new host? He asked, disbelieving, and got a chip nod from the blonde. Well, you don't look like much, pretty pathetic looking really, he harshly stated, making Naruto frown at the fox's rude comment on him. Naruto folded his arms. Well, looks like I was right, you really are a grouch after all, Naruto remarked, recalling his previous prejudgment of the Kyuubi. Kurama growled down at the boy, his red eyes seeming to glow. What did you just call me, boy? Demanded the Kyuubi angrily, making sure to hold his tongue on the cursing, just in case that man was still hovering around. Naruto shot the fox a blue-eyed scowl. You heard me, I called you a grouch, and while I'm at it, my name is not boy, it's Naruto Uzumaki. Dadabeo. Naruto shouted out while pointing childishly at the fox. The Kyuubi huffed at that, not really caring or seeing it as unimportant for him to know his new prison's name. Like I care what your name is, he stated in a bored flat tone as he donned a neutral look. Well, I care what yours is, the whiskered blonde replied suddenly, catching the fox off guard with that comment. Yeah, I know you have a name just like me and everyone else, and I also know you won't tell me today or maybe even tomorrow, but I hope one day you may come to trust me enough to let me know your name. Kurama looked on, completely stunned by the boy's honesty. No child could lie like this, he knew for sure. I must say this is a first. You know I have a name. You don't think me some mindless beast like the stories accuse me to be? Asked the fox, becoming more interested in the child below. Naruto shook his head. No, I know better, but I did it first, from what I heard the people say. But I learned that you have a mind and feelings too, just like everyone else, and it really does make me feel ashamed to know how you and your siblings have been treated by the world, trailed of Naruto, letting his head drop slightly at the feeling of guilt rising up inside him. Kurama could sense the guilt in the boy at the mention of humanity's bad treatment of him and his brothers and sisters. You really do feel that way, huh? You are a strange one to feel that way for us, after all we are nothing but monsters, Kurama stated, testing the waters of the boy. Naruto head snapped back up, the Kyuubi frowning defiantly. You're wrong. Shouted Naruto suddenly, startling Kurama with his sudden outburst. You are not a monster. You have only been treated like one, just like I have. I've been looked at like one and treated like one because I carry you, so I know some of what it feels like to be treated like something you're not. Naruto exclaimed, his voice filled with so many emotions as he started recalling all the bad times. The loneliness, the bullying, the whispers, how the people stared and glared at him like some monster or bomb just waiting to go off. So many emotion began to swell up inside of Naruto that it made him want to scream and cry out to the world, asking why. Why him? But somehow he found the strength to put it away and calm down. He knew why him, and he was past that now. He has long since accepted his burden. The Nine Tails looked down at the boy. He knew the boy had not gone through anything as bad as him, but he could tell the boy meant every word he said. This one is different from my previous hosts. I might just like this one. Kurama began chuckling, the sound echoing throughout the dimly lit room. Well, you're honest, I'll give you that, Naruto, he said in a humored tone, deciding to acknowledge the boy's name. Naruto looked up at the Kyuubi hopefully. So do you think you will give me a chance to be your friend? He asked, sounding excited at the thought of having a multi-story orange chakra fox as a buddy who is also really fluffy. Kyuubi was quite taken aback by this, not thinking the boy would just come right out and ask him such a thing. Whoa, hold up there, kid, I wasn't saying that, dude. I think we could talk, and maybe, yeah, we could possibly become acquaintances and then maybe friends, Kurama replied, sounding slightly panicked about the topic while giving a hold on their gesture with his claws. Naruto beamed a smile straight up at the giant fox, bright enough that you might feel the need for sunglasses. Really cool. That's better than I was expecting. Oh, I can't wait. In no time you and I are gonna be an awesome team. Cheered out Naruto, jumping up and down on the water, cheering like he won the lottery. Kurama looked confused by this. A team? He questioned with a cocked brow. Naruto nodded rapidly. Yeah, one of my goals is to become a perfect Jinchuriki, and to do that I need you and me to be able to work together and get along. Then there's the part where I need to be able to handle your chakra. Other than that I don't really know anything else, Naruto explained, rubbing the back of his sheepishly at the end about his lack of knowledge on the subject. Kurama's eyes narrowed dangerously at the boy, his fur bristling. So this is all it was about. Gaining my power, he seethed out, making his host look at him confused. Don't play dumb with me, you're just doing this to get to my power. Roared the Nine Tails furiously, jumping to the most obvious answer he knew. Naruto looked at the fox a little scared by his sudden change in attitude. I'm sorry if I offended you, I just got a little excited by the thought of you and me starting to actually work together, but it seems like you're not actually interested, he spoke out, dejected at seeing one of his goals in life falling apart before him. Kurama calmed down slightly, looking down at the boy still frowning and breathing heavily, his red eyes still burning with anger. What are you gonna do now then? He asked, gruffly, already having an assumed answer thought up. Naruto sighed, still looking down. I guess there's nothing I can do. I guess my goal of becoming a perfect Jinchuriki is out the window, but my dream to become the greatest ninja even is still there, though, Naruto answered with his hands in his short pockets while still looking down, kicking the water so he didn't have to look up at the mad fox. The Kyuubi was not expecting this response. He was expecting the boy to say he would get his power by force or something. Aren't you going to try and find a way to take my power? You could try that, he commented, wanting to know why Naruto didn't think of that. Naruto looked at Kurama like he was stupid or something. Well, that wouldn't make me a perfect Jinchuriki if I was stealing your chakra, plus that would prove me no better than the people who see you as a monster, and even worse than those who see you as nothing but a tool and a weapon, Naruto replied like it was the most obvious thing in the world. The fox was again shocked by the boy. There wasn't a sign that he was lying, only honesty was in his words. Kurama couldn't believe it. It was so hard to believe that this child only wanted his power if he was willing to give it. Father, could he be the one? Could this child be the one that you said would bring yous all together again? Inwardly questioned Kurama as the long and nearly unfamiliar feeling of hope began to once again spring to life within him. After coming down from his astonishment, Kurama regained his sharp toothy grin. Well, seems I had you all wrong, kid, keep up that attitude and I might just consider us becoming a team as you put it, the fox said, all his previous anger now gone. Naruto was about ready to jump for joy at seeing that his dream gained a second wind, but was stopped by Kurama as it seemed his was not done. But I won't simply give you my full power for multiple reason. One, he began lifting up one clawed finger. There's this pesky seal in the way, only letting so much of my chakra seep through, so you will have to get the key to that if there is one that is. Two, lifting up another clawed finger. You're much too young. Your body won't be able to handle everything I've got. He paused to let that fact sink in while smiling at the mention of his power. Even when I'm half the fox I once was I'm still just too powerful, and my third and main reason the sound of his tone now growing stern and serious, you want my full power you'll have to battle me for it. Rip it from my claws and prove to me that you are truly worthy to wield my full power he said with a tone of finality and a bloodthirsty glint in his. Naruto looked at the Kyuubi surprised by his conditions. So I need to get strong enough to defeat you and only then you will consider us a team? Asked Naruto not at all fazed by the look on Kurama's face, getting a curt nod. But you will let me use some of your chakra? He got another nod, but why give me chakra anyway? Asked Naruto curious on why the Kyuubi would give him any of his chakra if he didn't have to. It's simple really, it's so you can train with it, let your body get used to having my chakra flowing through it in greater amounts he began checking that Naruto was following. As you can see you're too young right now to have my full chakra going through you yet, but if you are not having any of my chakra flowing through you at all, then there results in another problem, your body will not be at all used to having my chakra flowing through it, thus it won't be prepared for the full amount he explained as clearly as he could. Naruto understood now why the fox was letting him have whatever chakra he could, it was just so he would be ready in case he won their future battle. Thank you Kyuubi for letting me use whatever chakra you can give me, I promise I will train hard and one day kick your furry ass with the strength I gain, and then you'll have no choice but to be my teammate thanked Naruto, bowing and acting polite, but was still grinning cheekily as he did. The Kyuubi huffed at the boy's sass. We'll see kid, I won't go down easy so you better realize that, and don't go getting ahead of yourself and come here half-baked, besides there will be no fight until you get the key to this damn thing, so you better hope there is one the Kyuubi pointed out, tapping on the bars with one of his long spear-sharp claws as he did. Naruto grinned happily don't worry I have this feeling it'll appear, don't know why, just do, but anyway are you willing to tell me your name? Asked Naruto changing subjects quickly, but got his answer in the form of the multi-story fox just smirking mockingly at him. Naruto pouted and huffed at that okay I get it that's a no, then, I guess I'll just have to wait, Naruto thought it would be best to just leave for now to give the fox some time to process things. Well I guess I will see you then he said while beginning to fade away and giving the fox a big smile and wave goodbye. After Naruto was gone Kurama decided to lie back down resting his head on his crossed orange furred paws while his 9 bushy tails swayed behind before settling down. That boy I have a good feeling about him, thought Kurama giving his signature grin before closing his blood-red eyes and drifting off to sleep. He had been having some really good dreams lately and was curious to see if he would have another enjoyable fantasy. After that day Naruto and Kurama who later trusted his host enough to reveal to him his name, had been talking more and more lately. Naruto later decided to introduce Sasuke to Kurama, with the latter making an attempt to rip the Uchiha's throat out for mistaking him for Madara. That mistake led to Kurama telling the young boys about the legendary Uchiha and how much of a bastard he thought him to be, though he held his tongue while telling the story because Hirofumi was present at the time. Sasuke was thunderstruck to hear that the Sharingan had the potential to enslave a Bijuu, but would never do it himself, since his best friend told him what the tailed beast had been through and had no desire to cause them more suffering. Naruto was also shocked to learn that one of the few methods to controlling a tailed beast was to use a Sharingan, it now made him wonder more what the others must be. A few months ago the pair were playing out in the snow since it was winter and snow very rarely fell in Fire Country, they wanted to have a ninja snowball fight, it's like a normal snowball fight only much more extreme. It was on one of these days that Naruto and Sasuke came across a young Hyuga girl being bullied by 3 older looking kids. Naruto being one who does not condone bullies in the slightest, especially given the fact that he himself had been a victim of it dozens of times in the past went over to deal with it, Sasuke followed along, deciding he too wanted to help the poor girl out. It wasn't hard for them to deal with the older kids, with the pair's training they were more than able to scare them off, after knocking out what they assumed was the leader or something the other two picked up their unconscious leader, wimped out and ran away. After that the girl thanked them both and revealed her name to be Hinata Hyuga. Naruto asked her if she would like to play with them, the girl had nervously accepted and the 3 had a fun day snowball fighting. If witnessed they imagined it'd be remembered as legendary. That was until Hinata's guard came along and picked her up ruining the fun, where he had been all that time none of them knew, but after that day the pair hadn't seen or heard from Hinata ever since, until today. Hey Sasuke look it's Hinata. Called out Naruto tapping his friend on the shoulder and pointing in the direction of said girl, he was clearly excited at seeing her again. Sasuke looked over to where his friend was pointing and saw he was right, there she was being escorted to the building by maybe the same guard as the one from Winter. Hinata was wearing a cream-colored and very bulky parka coat, which was odd to the pair, considering what time of the year it was and how very warm it currently was. So it is, do you think she will be in the same class as us? Sasuke asked coolly. Naruto thought on the question and hoped she would be considering she was one of the few kids his age who didn't treat him like dirt because of their parents or other children's influence. I hope so, she was really nice, plus fun to play with chirped Naruto, smiling brightly at the memory of their legendary snowball fight. Sasuke smirked. He too liked her, she was cool. In his books she didn't treat him like he was something fragile or look at him with pity for his losses, plus she was nice to his best friend, earning her a place in his good books. Yeah, she was pretty tough to hit, remarked the young Uchiha, referring to the snowball fight. Naruto nodded, recalling all the failed attempts at hitting her with the snowballs. She dodged nearly all of them with such ease that it almost felt like she had eyes in the back of her head or something. Little did they know that on that day Hinata finally awoke her Byakugan, which was quite convenient for her, that is. It took Naruto and Sasuke teaming up and pulling their resources together, said resources being nothing snowballs, and unleashing focused fire on her contentiously without pause. It worked, but they were nearly out of pre-made snowballs by the end. Turning to his friend, Naruto nudged Sasuke. "Wanna go say hi?" He asked but didn't wait for a reply and was already bolting off to go say hello to the young Hyuga girl. Sasuke looked on blankly for a sec before shruggingly and shaking his head at his friend's impatience. The young Uchiha quickly caught up with his energetic mate, who was already calling out to Hinata. As Sasuke made his approach, he noticed on the way all the looks on the parents' faces as they spotted Naruto and how some of them were now whispering to their children. He knew what they must be saying, and he knows Naruto isn't blind to this either, he just became an expert at ignoring it all. The ignorance of these people really did grind Sasuke's nerves sometimes, and he was sometimes ready to stick a fireball right up their asses sometimes, but Naruto and Hirofumi told him not to. Naruto suggested that if he needed to vent, then why not join him in on his pranks on the villagers. Sasuke was now considering. Naruto gave a toothy grin when the young Hyuga now spotted him. "Hi Hinata, remember us?" he asked her jokingly. Hinata looked between Naruto and Sasuke and nodded meekly, holding herself nervously as she spoke. "Yeah, hi Naruto, hi Sasuke, it's been a long time," she greeted, stuttering the same as she always does. Sasuke nodded in agreement. "It has been, we haven't seen you around the village since winter, is there a reason why we haven't?" he asked neutrally, hands in his pockets. Hinata nodded. "Yes, my father didn't want me out after that day. When I told him about the bullies he made me stay in and use the extra time for tea training," she explained, not going into much detail on the matter, but sounding and looking pretty down when talking about it. Naruto noticed this and gained a concerned expression. "Are you okay Hinata? It doesn't sound like you enjoyed it," asked the whiskered boy, not seeing how spending more time with your family could make one feel at all sad. Hinata averted her gaze away from the pair. "It's nothing," she said softly, wanting the subject to just be dropped. Sasuke and Naruto looked at each other, frowning at Hinata's extra shy and meek attitude, but mental agreed with each other not to press. So for the next few minutes, the trio just chatted about whatever. Naruto about the glory of orange, ramen and taking care of his plants. Sasuke about training and getting stronger while throwing in some comments on how the Sharingan trumps the Byakugan in so many ways that it's just not fair to compare them. Hinata about her sister and flower pressing and not really caring about which is the more superior to Justu and Konoha. After about 5 more minutes of this, the doors to the academy opened, showing a group of Chunin instructors, all staring blankly at the group of new pupils. Some frowned a little when they spotted Naruto's vivid blonde head amongst the crowd, but they said nothing on the matter. One of the Chunin stepped forward out of the group. He was a fairly tan man with his hair tied into a high ponytail and possessing a long scar going across the bridge of his nose, but still holding the appearance of a very friendly man. "Hello and welcome, I'm Iruka Yamino, and I would just like to welcome you all to the Konoha Shinobi Academy. Here you learn everything you need to get started in your careers," as proud shinobi of Konoha Iruka solemnly stated before he donned a kind smile. "And I must say I see a lot of great potential in this year's crop," he honestly stated with certainty, especially given all the clan children that easily stood out. All the future pupils smiled at this, now feeling extra pumped to get started on their road to becoming shinobi. After that speech, all the children said their goodbyes to their parents who came send them off before going with what even instructor called out their names and lined up in front of them with the other kids who were also called out. After the now formed classes went off with their individual teachers to whatever classroom they were assigned to. Luckily Naruto and Sasuke were in the same class along with Hinata, with their teachers being Iruka, who felt lucky himself to have nearly all the clan children as his pupils, and another man named Mizuki, with the latter giving our whiskered blonde some really bad vibes. After getting to the classroom, Iruka had everyone in the class introduce themselves, with all the introduction going well until it got to Naruto's. "Hi, my name is Naruto Uzumaki," and he was more than prepared to say more, but stopped when he began hearing whispers coming from all around the class. Children were now whispering to each other, saying stuff like "it's that weird kid" or "he's that really naughty boy mom and dad told me to stay away from," and so on. After hearing all that, Naruto fell silent and just sat back down, no longer feeling like talking anymore. Sasuke frowned at seeing this. He hated seeing his cheery friend sad, it just didn't suit him. He was always happy and grinning idiotically for whatever reason, never letting anything get to him. That was the Naruto that Sasuke was used to seeing. "Quiet down. ordered Iruka, making everyone shut up instantly. One of your fellow classmates was in the middle of introducing himself and none of you are even listening, so pay attention next time or you'll be sitting in detention," said one very cross Iruka, and so everyone stayed silent. Iruka then put back on a smile and turned to the still down, looking blonde Naruto. "Would you like to start again? I promise you will not be interrupted again," he asked kindly, adding tone when turning to the class, putting emphasis on the will. Naruto looked up and thought for a second on it and turned to Sasuke, who gave him an encouraging smirk which helped restore Naruto's confidence, on top of feeling Hirofumi in the back his head giving him a sort of mental push. Naruto took in a deep breath before standing back up reinvigorated. "Hi, I'm Naruto Uzumaki, and I'm gonna be the best ninja ever, Dadabeo," jeered out Naruto, who became confused on why some people started laughing at him. Some random boy in the back of the class spoke in one of the most condescending tones Naruto had ever heard. "Yeah right. Like a loser like you could ever become Hokage," laughed out the boy along with others in the class who also thought it ridiculous that a labeled nobody like Naruto could ever hope to become Hokage or anything near. Naruto started gritting his teeth at this. "I could if I wanted to." He thought I so could too. "Just you watch. I'll become the Hokage. No. Better yet, I'll not just become the Hokage, I will surpass all the previous Hokages, Dadabeo," roared out Naruto, now fired up to fulfill this new goal that just entered his life. All Naruto ever wanted was to become the strongest ninja ever, make some friends, and be acknowledged by the people of the village as Naruto Uzumaki, and not as some boy carrying a supposed demon inside him that turned out to not even be a demon, but someone who was just as misunderstood as himself. He never really thought about being Hokage until now, but he was now seeing it as fitting. Want to be the greatest ninja, might as well take the greatest ninja's title, and he really did like the old man's hat, say what you want, but red is his second favorite color alongside yellow, because without those two colors, his favorite color wouldn't exist. His declaration just seemed to make all those who were previously laughing at him laugh even harder. But Sasuke just smirked at his friend, not at all thinking it to be a hopeless goal for his friend at all. He personally thought his friend would make an excellent Kage. Hinata was also thinking along the same lines as Sasuke about Naruto. He was a bright, sunny and very welcoming person. She doesn't know much more than that about him right now, but nevertheless she did get this good feeling coming from him, something that just make her believe one day he could do it, something that could only be found in true future leaders. Iruka smiled at Naruto, liking the boy's determination, but thought it was about time to move on. "Okay class, settle down, settle down. Thank you Naruto for your introduction and good luck in your dream to become Hokage. But know this, you have picked a tough goal, and the road to it will be a long and arduous, and much more so than any other road a ninja could decide to take," lectured the teacher wisely to not just the blonde but everyone in the class. Naruto nodded firmly understanding and sat back down. "Okay next," said Iruka, who nodded to Sasuke who was sitting next Naruto. Sasuke nodded and stood up with his hands in his pockets, looking instinctively cool to everyone, especially the young girls in the class, who were also now whispering to each other about how cool and cute he looks. "I'm getting this really ominous feeling right now," thought the young Uchiha, thought briefly, not hearing the whispers of the girls. "My name is Sasuke Uchiha," he said simply before sitting back down, not really interested on saying any more about himself than he had to, leaving other people in the class expecting more but never getting any. The girls in the room all seemed to start whispering amongst themselves more. Sasuke still did not notice, but the ominous feeling hanging over him only seemed to worsen as time went on. Naruto nudged Sasuke, getting his attention. "Sasuke, you alright? You seem a bit tense all of a sudden," asked Naruto, confused on what could possibly be bothering his friend right now. Sasuke shook his head. "I'm just getting this bad feeling, but I'm sure it's nothing," said the young Uchiha, unknowing of the metaphorically approaching storm that was just beyond that metaphorical horizon. Naruto didn't feel so certain, his feelings have never really steered him wrong in the past, and he was currently seeing this air of misery being pulled towards his raven-haired friend. How he could see it and recognize it he didn't know, but he did. But nevertheless he just decided to let it slide and continued paying attention to the class, thinking he must be just having an off day himself. Once everyone was done with introductions, Iruka moved on to informing that today's class would be used to test everyone's current skill level, so he took the class out back to the school's yard. "Okay class, today we'll be sparring. When I call out your names I want you to step into the circle here and you'll have a one-on-one spar to show me and Mizuki here your current taijutsu skills," Hiraku explained as he was holding a pad with all his pupils' names on it. So for the next hour or so Naruto and Sasuke watched as the spars went on. It became clear to them which members of the class must have shinobi parents and who didn't, given how some went down without even what could be called a fight. After a few more spars the pair were knocked out of their sizing up of their fellow classmates when they heard their names being called out. "Okay Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Uzumaki, you're up," said Iruka simply. Most of the prejudiced students in the class were hoping to see the young Uzumaki get decked and humiliated, while others whose parents didn't decide to fill their children's heads with biased disdain for the boy were just watching, interested to see how this fight would play out. The fighters quickly stepped into the circle and stood at the end opposite each other looking at one another, ready to get started. Okay, you both ready? Haruka asked, getting curt nods from each of the young ninjas to be okay. Begin. Called out the scarred instructor, bringing down his hand in a chopping motion. The pair of combatants instantly shot off at each other. Sasuke was not going to use his Sharingan, and Naruto was also not going to draw on any of Kurama's chakra. This would be a fight of their purely earned ability. Half an hour later, the pair were laying spread out on the ground, dusted over with dry dirt, bruised up and gasping for air. They had been fighting each other non-stop, with Sasuke being the agilest of the two, but Naruto countered that with his sheer endurance and stamina, so by the end, both just ended up being ungraceful heaps on the floor. Haruka just stared, amazed by how long the fight went on, for this was probably the longest first-year spar in academy history, he thought to himself, greatly impressed by the pair of exhausted fighters. Mizuki had to leave to go take care of something else, he said. He coughed into his hand before speaking. Okay, good spar you two. I think this can be safely called a draw, he declared before ticking something off on his pad. Okay, I think I better get you two to the nurse's office, yeah? He questioned rhetorically, only getting groans of agreement from the two banged-up kids, to which served to make him chuckled. An hour or so later, Naruto and Sasuke eventually returned from the nurse's office. The nurse didn't seem to care about Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki, and if she did, she didn't show it, which was good enough for the blonde really. The pair entered back into the classroom and immediately seemed to gain everyone's attention. Before Sasuke knew it, he was quickly being ganged up on by nearly every girl in the frickin' classroom, asking if he was okay, with a lot of them sending Naruto angry looks, which confused the blonde to no end because these glares were different to the ones he was used to receiving. Sasuke quickly realized what was happening and finally understood what the origins of that ominous feeling he was previously having. It was something his brother and father once warned him of. A curse of unknown origins, one which only seems to be passed down through the Uchiha main household, the horrible curse of fangirls. Explosions. But the skull smoke cloud with doom written below in capitals popped into the mind of Sasuke. Oh god no. Oh god no. Please tell me this isn't happening, Naruto, Gramps, help, emergency. Begged Sasuke through the mental link. I don't know what you're expecting from me, kid, I'm dead, remember, Hiro replied, shrugging his shoulders. Within the garden. He was sculpting a new stone sculpture. This one was of the One-Tails, Shukaku. Hiro was currently halfway through. He started a few months back. Hiro decided he wanted to do sculptures of all the tailed beasts. He's going to have them be life-sized and have them be placed out in the ocean so that they would make a lovely view. That's of course, if you're not scared of life-size statues of the tailed beasts, that is. Naruto just looked confused. How? Questioned the blonde, wondering how he was going to help Sasuke with whatever this was. Sasuke looked over at him as panicked as he would allow himself to look, not wanting to show any weakness in front the demons that were beginning to slowly box him into a corner. I don't know. Think of something, will ya? He mentally screamed out as the group of what looked like vicious predators to Sasuke began closing in further. At this point he could feel them breathing down his neck, with no one else seeming at all interested in helping him, and neither of the teachers appeared to be in the classroom right now. Just bloody fantastic. Naruto thought for a second and had a solid idea in his head. Okay, I think I have a plan, dude, he stated, slyly beginning to grin like a fox. Sasuke's eyes narrowed at the blonde. Dude. He repeated, suspicion and irritation in his tone. Naruto gave an even bigger foxy grin. I will only do it if you agree to help me in any future pranks I may require your assistance in, Naruto stated, making his offer with that mastermind mindset coming a little to the surface. Sasuke scowled at his friend, prepared to decline, but then looked at the now very close horde and was quickly rethinking his answer. Fine. Deal. Just help me out here already. Agreed the reluctant Uchiha desperately, not seeing any other way out at this point. He was too boxed in. Naruto nodded, smiling at the fact that he'd managed to get Sasuke to agree to his offer so easily, so not wasting a second the blonde acted on his plan. Oh cool. I didn't know you girls all liked having spiders crawling all over you. Naruto innocently cheered to the group of girls. Not a moment later did the group of girls all started squealing while flailing frantically about in an attempt to shake off the fictional eight-legged insects. Seeing his opportunity, Sasuke gracefully leaped over the horde of predators to the safety of his seat and let loose a relieved breath. He turned to thank Naruto, but soon realized that it wasn't his blonde friend next to him now, but in fact another blonde, a girl to be exact. She was not alone, she also seemed to have a pink-haired friend with her, and both were currently gazing at him with hearts in their eyes and twinkling sparkles around them. Furthermore, they looked to also be in love-drunken states. The Uchiha scanning for his blonde buddy and found that he was now cornered by the same group of girls, only now they were looking at Naruto with looks of pure fury, and man, if looks could kill Naruto, might even be dead to even death. If this is what Sasuke was seeing the whole time, I now understand why he was so frightened, thought Naruto, trembling. At destroy him, said one of the girls with a voice that would make ice freeze. Eek. Was all Naruto could voice out before being thrown into a world of pain and misery. Hirofumi prayed for Naruto's well-being, knowing a woman's wrath, no matter how unreasonable it may be, is something fierce, no matter what age. Sasuke saw his hope of escape get beat down brutally before his eyes and leaving him only one opinion: to enact it his clan's secret defense Uchiha style. Art of brooding, that's right, I'm making this a technique. Sasuke laced his fingers together, placed his elbows on the desk, and had his hands obscuring his mouth as he began to gaze blankly into free space, a solid antisocial defense developed and passed down through his family for these exact moments. Some time passed with the now identified Ino and Sakura trying and failing to talk to Sasuke, and Naruto receiving the beating and lesson of his life, whatever that lesson is, was lost to him because he's only 8 and girls mature faster than boys. Poor guy, he had no clue what he was getting himself into. Iruka, who'd finally returned from whatever he was doing to the side of a beaten and smoking heap of Naruto, passed out on the floor. Twitching on occasion, showing he was thankfully still alive. Also, there was a lot of angry but also kind of satisfied looking girls all returning to their seats. Iruka decided not to ask about what happened while he was gone and just had Naruto taken back to the nurse's office. Class continued on with nothing eventful happening. Sasuke just continued to ignore the two girls until the end of class, proving the Uchiha defense works flawlessly. By the end of class, the young Sharingan user decided to go and check on Naruto. On his way to the office, he found Hinata was also thinking the same thing. The two girls from before tried asking him out on a date, but he just told them to go look at a calendar. They looked at him like he was stupid, but he just shrugged it off and just went on his way, because he too is only 8. Hirofumi laughed his ass off when he saw this, but didn't say a thing, but he did capture the dumbstruck looks on the girls' faces with his Sharingan. They were priceless. Oh ho 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 ho, how are they gonna react when they find out where babies really come from, he thought, heartily chuckling to himself at the assumed image. Sasuke and Hinata soon arrived at the office and saw Naruto sitting up in his bed, not looking to be in much of a bad state, and was just drinking some water from a glass. He had some plasters and bandages here and there, but nothing looking like it was covering anything serious. Oh hey guys, you didn't need to come and check in on me, I'm fine really, Naruto reassured, but still sounding pretty happy to see they came anyway. Sasuke just waved his words off. Nah, it's no big deal, Naruto. Besides, what kind of friend would I be to not come and visit you after the beating you took on my part? Didn't think they would react like that though, Sasuke commented, trailing off as he did, sounding honestly surprised while stepping forward towards the bed. Naruto paled at the mention of the monsters that attacked him. Gulp. It's hard to describe in words, Sasuke, they just turned so quickly it was like a switch was flipped in their heads or something, and they just turned into such cold creatures, like they were made of stone and became soulless. It was horrible, Dadabeo. Described Naruto, sounding fairly traumatized by the whole experience and was visible shivering in terror. The pair of visitors stared at Naruto, Hinata looking bewildered, not understanding how it could possibly be as bad as Naruto was describing. Sasuke, on the other hand, was looking at his friends with pity, remembering Shisui giving him a similar description from when he once helped Itachi with his fangirls. He described them as ice maidens sent from the coldest abyss of the underworld. Sorry Naruto, but I promise, when you want to call in those favors I'll drop anything, except for that one thing, and I will be right there to help, he promised. Naruto nodded smiling. Hinata cocked an eyebrow at what that one thing must be and what favor Sasuke owes Naruto. Hinata walked closer to Naruto's bed. I'm glad to see that you're alright, Naruto. It's amazing how fast you've recovered. You look barely even hurt, Hinata commented, amazed and surprised by the Uzumaki's current state of health. Naruto simply laughed heartily while rubbing the back of his head. Yeah, I know, I've always healed quick, must just show how naturally awesome I am, Dadabeo, Naruto replied, trying to play it off as something completely normal, to which Hinata brought given how naturally he was covering it up. Sasuke was a bit surprised by Naruto's acting. Usually, the Nine Tails host wouldn't be able to act his way through a play for the blind and deaf, but here he was doing it smoothly. He was impressed by his friend's control of his emotions and body language. The Uchiha laughed, mocking the blonde. Yeah, whatever Naruto, I'm sure it's just because unlike most people, you are just so simple to put back together, taunted Sasuke, giving a superior smirk when he finished with his arms neatly folded. Naruto glared at the Uchiha. What did you say, duck butt? Yelled the injured blonde, seeing his retort hit home when Sasuke's eyebrow twitched and his smirk was wiped quickly from his face. What did you just call me, blondie? Bit out Sasuke, gaining a twitching sinister smile from said blondie. Naruto narrowed his blue eyes. You heard me, duck butt, repeated Naruto, with emphasis this time, not backing down and gaining a feral look. Sasuke laughed, not a kind laugh, this one promised pain. Well, it seems someone wants to stay in this bed for a bit longer, he said, his face becoming half-shadowed somehow, a dark air forming around him. Naruto met the challenge with his own sinister laugh. Come and try it, I could still kick your ass even if I was in a full body cast, boasted the Uzumaki. At this point lightning was shooting between the two. Hinata assumed it must have been some kind of genjutsu, but if it was she couldn't seem to break out of it and she was much too nervous to do anything about it. Sasuke grin grew a little. Why don't we test it then? The Uchiha roared out and charged at his friend-turned opponent. Naruto shot up from his bed and leapt at Sasuke. Bring it on then duck butt. He shouted before he collided with the Sharingan user. This fight was nothing like the spar outside. This one was just a childish tussle which resulted in the two becoming covered in a dust cloud with nothing but shouts, complaints and flying limbs coming out. Hinata just stood there, silently watching this happen alongside the nurse who just returned a few seconds ago. I just know these two are gonna be regulars here, the nurse stated in a tone of annoyance while shaking her head before taking a drag of her lit cigarette and walking off to her desk. Hinata plainly nodded in agreement with the older woman. Hinata looked back at the dust cloud that was Naruto and Sasuke and giggled. She could now see that they were just play fighting, if the appearance of a genuine smile was any hint. She had this feeling that these two were gonna be a great team one day and that their names will one day be recognized out there in the big wide world. Irifumi chuckled at Sasuke and Naruto as they had their little fight. He knew the two wouldn't really hurt each other, it was just something they did when they ran out of comebacks and retorts. The spirit leaned back against his tree and gazed up at the dark dancing leaves above him. School, enjoy it while it lasts. You too. The world is a big and complicated place, so enjoy this time of peace and simplicity while it lasts. Your lives as ninjas in this world will be long and arduous. It will take you down many paths, but I'm confident you'll adapt, he said wisely to himself before closing and deactivating his Sharingan eyes, then drifting off to sleep with a small peaceful smile on his face. Come on Naruto. Deck that Uchiha. Kurama roared out. He was currently watching the fight through his host eyes, itching to see Sasuke getting beaten. He just looked so much like Madara he couldn't help but want to see it happen, but sadly all he was getting was play fighting from the two. Humph. Disappointing, he grunted out before deciding to just go to sleep himself. Maybe I'll have another dream where I'm gutting that bastard Madara like a fish and popping his precious eyes between my fingers before eating their squished up remains, he thought to himself, grinning and deciding to go to sleep to find out. He'd been having wonderful dreams lately. It's been 5 years since Naruto and Sasuke first started the Ninja Academy. They were currently only a day or so away from finally graduating, then after they would finally get to start their lives as real shinobi. School life had gone by fairly well for the pair over the years. They had made some friends but only within a minor group within the class that mainly consisted of anyone who came from a clan, since it appeared that they were the only ones that didn't have their heads filled with spite and prejudice towards our blonde Uzumaki. Sasuke, on the other hand, was given many offers for friendship from nearly every kid in the class, but he wouldn't give any of them the time of day when they dared pick on Naruto. Anyone who had the gall to bully his best friend would never be any sort of a friend of his. Naruto at some point went to see the old Hokage and requested that when they are all placed in teams that he could be on the same team as Sasuke. The Hokage explained that he couldn't just do that and that the teams would be picked at random. Though Hiruzen didn't fail to mention that the top boy and top girl of the graduating year would be placed with the worst student of that same year by default. That unexpectedly got the old man a big promise from the Jinchuriki that he would be the worst student even recorded in school history. And oh boy did Naruto keep to his word, scoring the lowest in nearly every subject in the academy from written tests to target practice, intel gathering, and even went as far as throwing a lot of fights that he could have probably won blindfolded. The only exceptions being any spars against Sasuke, which would still end with them both going to the nurse's office, who they visit regularly, and turns out she had quit smoking about 2 years ago. Good for her. Naruto had of course not really let himself become stupid and uneducated. He's in fact probably one of the smartest students in the academy alongside Sasuke, Shino, Sakura with Shikamaru, never really having any other competition apart from his own genius father. The Uchiha and Uzumaki had been going to the shinobi section of the library now for some years, looking up the history of the shinobi world. It also sadly turned out that there was even tighter security within that area. It seems you need to actually be an official genin in order to have unrestricted access to the ninjutsu and higher level genjutsu's areas within the library. They still had access to taijutsu and other low-level genjutsu scrolls and books, the latter being of more use to Sasuke than Naruto. They especially needed to go to the library because of Naruto's fake sleeping act, eventually turned into actual sleeping at some point during his whole facade of the worst student ever, making him miss some pretty important stuff in class. The pair's training under their grandfather figure has been showing great results over the few years. Naruto's relationship with Kurama has made great leaps and bounds to the point that the pair can communicate freely, just like with Hiro. Kurama could now detect whether or not Naruto was in a genjutsu, but can't actively free him from it due to the seal being in the way. The blonde can now also draw on his tenant's available chakra anytime he wishes, which at max sends him into a one-tail state. He was warned that if he tries forcing any higher then the seal may start getting damaged and Kurama's tainted chakra could begin seeping in, even if it's against the fox's wishes. Sasuke had also made great leaps in his prowess with the Sharingan, now fully able to see through most genjutsus cast upon him by Hirofumi's own Sharingan, which the spirit did to test both boys regularly. Hiro eventually started letting Sasuke practice the copying function of the Sharingan, letting him copy some low-level jutsus. The ghost would constantly prank him by sometimes having the jutsus be water, earth or even wind types, which always made him and Naruto snicker as he failed miserably when trying to perform them. Both the boys had come a long way in their shinobi arts together, like their taijutsu, shuriken and kunai jutsus and other weapons they had tried out. Sasuke had naturally been showing talent in genjutsu due to his eyes being a natural medium for him to cast them with. He had even started taking up some medical ninjutsus after asking if Hiro knew any, in which he did. Naruto, on the other hand, didn't possess that level of chakra control and was given the suggestion by Hiro to maybe try out the sealing arts, which he quickly discovered he was pretty damn good at. Sasuke had given sealing a go but soon gave up, finding it way too hard and annoying to understand. The pair's ninjutsu practice had greatly grown since the beginning. About a couple years back Hirofumi thought the boys to be old enough and more importantly responsible enough to start learning more advanced techniques and to maybe start developing some of their own even. Sometime after discovering his natural talent for sealing, Hirofumi had decided it was time to tell Naruto the meaning behind his last name. Naruto was shocked to hear that Uzumaki was, in fact, a clan name and that they had been wiped out during the Second Shinobi World War, having been greatly feared for both their skill in the sealing arts and their strong alliance with Konoha. Naruto was saddened to hear that his clan was now gone, but was happy when Hirofumi told him that after the war, the symbol of the Uzumaki clan was integrated into the flak jackets of all Chunins and higher. The swirl was even later worked into the Hidden Leaf's very insignia as a way of final remembrance and respect to the Leaf's fallen allies of Yuzu. After knowing this, Naruto went to learn all he could about his clan and found quite a lot in the library, and once he did he presented his findings to the third so he could keep his original source, Hirofumi, covered up. Hiruzen was surprised that the whiskered boy had found out so early about his clan, but was nonetheless glad and felt that it was the perfect opportunity to tell the boy about his mother. Naruto was of course indescribably excited that he would get to learn about his mother, and when he did finally lay eyes on a picture of her he thought her to be the prettiest woman in the world, as well as the most terrifying when he saw one of her angry, how she was making an aura of fire like that he and the cameraman who took that picture will never know. Naruto had also revealed to Hiruzen that he was aware that he's the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, which further surprised the old Hokage. He also then mentioned that he had talked to the Nine Tails and that him and the fox were actually getting along rather well. As Naruto went on, the third felt like he was about to have a heart attack at hearing this and asked the boy if he and the fox had struck any sort of a deal. Naruto had answered honestly, saying that the Kyuubi would let him have full access to his power once he was strong enough to take it from him in a fight, but before all that he would need the key to unlocking the seal. 2.5 years ago. I see, so you must defeat him in an internal struggle and take his chakra by force in order to prove yourself to him, is that correct, Naruto? Asked the old Hokage seriously while sitting behind his desk, leaning forward on his elbows with his wrinkled hands intertwined, obscuring his mouth. Naruto nodded while looking through the box of his mother's things, showing more interest in them than he was for the current topic of discussion. But I'm gonna have to get really strong if I hope to beat him, he said. So, we've been talking quite a lot though, he's kind of a grouch if you ask me, he's got this serious grudge against this Madara guy, and he's not too fond of the first Hokage either, and his wife too, it seems, Naruto confirmed, trailing off as he did. He picked up another picture of his mum, this one was showing her grinning hugely while in her ninja uniform. It also had written on the back in black ink, a date and a note which read, "Just made Jonin databang." Hiruzen eyes narrowed slightly at all the information Naruto was telling him. It all seemed right, and if the Kyuubi really was sentient, then he would, of course, harbor hard feeling towards those specifically named people. Madara put the Kyuubi forcefully under his control and made him do his every bidding. That alone would make anyone furious. The first then captured him along with the other tailed beasts, and later Mito sealed the Kyuubi within herself, making herself his prison for the next dozen decades. Hiruzen looked back over to Naruto, wondering something. Naruto, did the Kyuubi tell you who his previous hosts were? Asked Hiruzen curiously. Naruto looked confused, he didn't know that Kurama had previous hosts before. What do you mean previous? Kurama never said he had a previous host, old man, he answered, now looking interested enough to take his attention away from the box of his mother's stuff. Hiruzen was slightly surprised that Naruto didn't know. I see, so he never told you. Well, yes, there have been 2 previous Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi before you, Naruto. All Uzumakis like yourself. In fact, the first was Mito Uzumaki, the first's wife and a master of sealing, he began, seeing that Naruto was finally starting to understand why Kurama had hard feelings against the woman, and the second was your mother, Naruto, he revealed. Naruto looked shocked at hearing that his mother was also the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails like him, but then something clicked in his head. Wait, if Kurama was being controlled on the day I was summoned, and my mother was the previous host, then that means he took Kurama from her on the day I was summoned, whispered out a stunned Naruto. Hirizen's eyes widened slightly at hearing Naruto words, seeing him beginning to piece things together quickly. Yes, Naruto, so it is true that the Kyuubi was being controlled then? He asked, getting a confirming nod from the frowning blonde. Yes, the Kyuubi was stolen from your mother after you were born. You see, Naruto, a female Jinchuriki's zeal weakens when they are giving birth, and somehow this man was aware of that detail, he explained, sounding like a professor. Naruto was a bit confused on one thing though. Old man, I have a question, he asked, still lost on one thing. The old Hokage was wondering what the boy had to say. Yes, Naruto, ask away, he said, giving a small hand gesture. What does birth mean? Asked Naruto innocently, head slightly tilted. Hirizen's eyes widened visibly, and the pipe he was smoking fell out of his mouth, and it struck him. He said summoned. He didn't say born or birth. Hiruzen coughed briefly and quickly recomposed himself and picked back up his pipe and laid it down on his desk. Well, Naruto, I think we should have a small talk about the birds and the bees after this, he informed the blonde, who just dumbly nodded, still not getting it.